Welcome to episode 007. Or should we say
007.
That's right, guys. We've made it to episode 7. And we couldn't be more excited to, be doing the James Bond episode.
That's
even though
right.
this episode has absolutely
nothing to
to
do.
do with James. But in fact, I'm going to talk about something far, far away from James. So let's jump into what have we been playing, what have we been buying. I've started the last few episodes, so I'm going to have Rick tell us what he's been playing.
All right. So I've been continuing with my mission of getting the speedrun trophy in Zero Drifter.
Have you finished it?
I have not. I'm approaching like the 60-70% completion mark.
So correct me if I'm wrong. You're making like save checkpoints.
Yeah. So the way the game works, being similar to Metroid, you have a save point and then a trek to the next save point. And I'm kind of treating those as like gameplay segments. And on average, I'll restart 3 or 4 times. From one save point to the next, trying to get the fastest possible run within that segment as I possibly can.
Would you say you're on track right now?
I am on track right now, but it is monotonous and it is challenging.
Okay.
You know, it's not how I would play a game.
Right.
You know, it's not how I would choose to enjoy the medium of the video game. So I started. That's going well. I'm enjoying the task that it is, but it doesn't feel like I'm really playing to enjoy my time.
I see.
In the meantime,
you're challenging yourself.
Right. Exactly. It's a challenge. It's something. It's a trophy that got away from me that I was reminded of that I just needed to go back and make it happen. So if it's the only speedrun trophy I ever get, I'll be fine with that.
Yeah. Never again.
Yeah. And I'll keep updating about how that's going. In the meantime, though, this week I picked up out of my high stack of games that I own that haven't started.
The backlog.
The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles on Switch. I started playing this. Haven't actually only started it like 2 days ago.
Okay.
So I'm still in the investigation portion of the first chapter, so I'm not gonna talk too much about what I've seen so far in the game. But if you don't know what this is, it's like a compilation of the first and second Great Ace Attorney games,
which are kind of like a far-flung prequel, right?
Yeah, so it's very removed. There are references, but it's very removed from Ace Attorney 1 and 2, starring, and I have to look at the case to get the pronunciation of the main character. It's Ryunosuke. Try that again. Ryunosuke Naruhodo is the main character.
Okay. And apologies to all of our Japanese listeners.
He is an ancestor of Phoenix Wright.
Okay. Now this one is actually set correctly in Japan, right?
Yes, it is, and it is. It is very distant in the past.
Right. I know the current Ace Attorney or the modern Ace Attorney games are in outside of Japan are set in Los Angeles, and I say that with quotes.
With quotes, because a lot of the settings and stuff are clearly Japan.
Yeah, this is just a localization choice that was made a long, long time ago, and they've just decided to stick with it and not retcon it back to being in Japan. And I know it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing that the series kind of does nowadays.
There was an Ace Attorney musical that happened in Japan that I've only read tidbits about, but
wouldn't be surprised if that's available
like
on Blu-ray. They put a lot of their stage plays and stuff that they do on DVD and Blu-ray in Japan.
Yeah, it's something I'm gonna have to look more into.
Maybe it's like an original. There's an Ace Attorney anime as well.
I think you're right, and I think there's a manga.
Yeah, like it's pretty fully fleshed out, the series.
I beat the first Ace Attorney, and I think I got to the very last chapter of the second game. I wanted to play them in order, and I still want to, but I felt that playing this out of order wouldn't really mess things up too much, seeing that how removed it is from
I will say, I don't know how you can stop a game like dead in the tracks right at the end and just move on to something else.
I have it's just my signature brain's way of doing things to get right up to that 90% and then just
walk away.
Walk away. It's not something I choose to do.
Is it maybe like your brain is like, I don't want this to be over, so I'll just never finish it?
I don't know what. It could be that.
I mean, there's a lot of Ace Attorney games to play still.
There are.
3, 4, 5, and 6.
There's the Apollo Justice games
Yeah.
and Ace Attorney Investigations and
there's a
all
lot.
that.
And we're getting the next Ace Attorney collection early next year, I believe.
Right.
It has, I think, 4, 5, and 6 on.
Yeah, those are the ones that were Japan only, right?
No,
I mean, they all were at one point, but like
they were like physical only releases in Japan, I think.
right.
And then we only got them as digital releases on the 3DS here in the West.
Okay.
So, and then again, of course, for the 4, 5, and 6 is only being released digitally for some reason in the West.
Right.
Which, we discussed previously is just an annoying shame. But thankfully there are some ways to get like English options, but you'll have to go to websites like PlayAsia to accomplish that.
Mm-hmm. If you play physical, you mean?
Right, like if you want a physical copy. Otherwise you can just buy it on the eShop or the PlayStation Network, and maybe it's coming to Xbox. I'm not totally sure.
Right. I gotcha. So yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Okay. I spent about 20 hours over the weekend from Friday, evening to Sunday night, powering through the last few chunks of Final Fantasy 16, and I'm happy to say I've completed the game. Mm-hmm. I really, really enjoyed the game. I enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed the story. The final boss was pretty great. There was some like really, really cool moments for, I think, a lot of symbolism. Mm-hmm. Like at one point, the final boss sort of almost has like a Sephiroth-esque kind of look, like he's got like one wing and stuff. Yeah, like there's some interesting callbacks, and there's this really cool moment between the boss and the player character where like one of them is saying like basically they say Final Fantasy like when they talk to each other. I don't know how to like explain it, but like it's just like it flowed so perfectly. Right. Like one of them's like, this is a fantasy or that you live in, or something. I'm just making this up. And then the player character is like, well, I'm finally gonna put you away, or I don't know. Like that's not what he says.
They make a title reference. Yeah,
I thought it was pretty cute. Anyways, yeah, just a great experience. I don't think I'm going to stick around for the Platinum Trophy. I thought about it, but you have to replay the entire game on a new Game Plus mode difficulty that gets unlocked after you beat the game. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think I have that in me. I mean, it's 71 hours to finish the game. Now, I did every single side quest. I crafted every single optional weapon and piece of gear.
Does that all carry over in the New Game Plus?
Yes, it does. Your level carries. In fact, like the game is basically expecting you to be level capped when you jump into New Game Plus, from my understanding.
Oh man,
yeah.
This is like, for me.
It's not like you don't start New Game Plus and all the enemies are level 1.
Right.
They're all like level 50, which is like the level cap. And now the level cap has been raised to 100 in New Game Plus.
Okay.
So maybe if I ever get a hankering to play the game again down the line, maybe I will do New Game Plus. But as it stands right now, yeah, I'm ready to play something else. It's been taking up a lot of my time. Not that I minded one single bit. In fact, I'm really looking forward to the 2 DLCs that they announced for the game a month or 2 ago, back at PAX. PAX being this big event that happens in Seattle every year, well, and all over the place actually, but the main PAX event has always been held in Seattle.
Yep.
And they haven't really said what the DLC is going to be, but just that it would explore the characters and the world of, or the continent of Valisthea further.
So that, like everything you just talked about with the New Game Plus especially, speaks to me.
I mean, it sounds like the right way to do a New Game Plus.
It is. It's
and
how
the mode is
be
called
done.
Final Fantasy difficulty, or Final Fantasy mode.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I have to do that now. You just sold me, which I was already sold.
So I just sold you on a 70-hour game that you're then going to play a second time for 70 hours.
Right.
Now, I do wonder if like your quest completion and stuff carries over from the main game or not. I'm not sure.
If Final Fantasy 15 is anything to go off of, certain quests will, but hunts won't.
Okay.
And
oh, got it. Yeah, some of those hunts, I will say it was a game that I felt like it got easier over time. Like the game felt much harder at the beginning than it did by the end. Now the final boss was tough at times for me.
Right.
I had some trouble predicting his movements and getting my reactions to his movements correctly. I still managed to do it without having any fails or having to continue.
Right.
But there was a couple moments where I was. I mean, if I hadn't done some of the side quests and increased my potion capacity to max and stuff, I may have had to redo the boss fight at some point. But it was awesome. And I mean, maybe one of the coolest. There's a lot of cutscenes near the end.
Yeah.
And there's this.
It's Final Fantasy.
Right. So before you're doing the one-on-one battle with the boss, there's this really cool tag team thing where there's 3 of you and you're all in your icon forms and you're just having this crazy battle with the final boss up in the skies above this particular area. And it was pretty incredible. And while it's a cutscene, it does have some interactive moments where you're pounding the square button to
right.
Yeah, and so I did enjoy it, and it's just super it's Final Fantasy as heck.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, especially the final battle. There's also a big kind of I hate to call it a quick time event because it's really not. It's not super chat. It's not where you're pressing R1, then square, then X, then circle, and then X 5 times, and then you're not doing something like that. It's there's 2 buttons that are used in quick time events. It's either the dodge button, which is L1 or R1, and then it's the square button for attack. Those are the only 2 things where you kind of have those cinematic dodges or cinematic attacks, I think they're called in the game.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. I can totally envision what you're talking about. That New Game Plus though, that's the kind of thing I plan for in my first run, and then invest in.
And now I understand that there's these sort of equipment trinkets that you can get in the game that'll reduce the cooldown of this ability by 5 seconds, reduce the cooldown of this, or add 5% damage to that. I understand in New Game Plus you can, if you get a duplicate of that trinket, you can combine the 2 and then give it a greater effect. So instead of it being increase the damage by 5%, now it's increase the damage by 10% if you combine 2 duplicate trinkets.
Yeah.
And these trinkets can only be obtained once in the main game. And my understanding is you can keep doing New Game Plus over and over again, and basically eventually craft
that
crazy
follows,
trinkets.
That follows the rest of the series. But I think because Final Fantasy 16 is one of my PS5 priorities that are current, as well as Honkai Star Rail and
well, your PlayStation Portal is going to be here soon,
and Mortal Kombat 1. But yeah, I think I came to the realization that subconsciously I haven't touched these games,
right? For
multiple reasons, but one being that I'm waiting for the PlayStation Portal.
Right.
I think I want to start with that in my hands.
Yeah.
I'll
be honest. I've been I don't know. You being so positive about the Portal has made me really looking at it. I have a GameStop gift card for $40 that I'm maybe I should just use it on the Portal.
I think I've accepted it for what I know that it is. I haven't thought of it as some other console or something.
Right.
It's a streaming peripheral.
Right.
And that's perfect.
Yeah.
I could really use something like that.
I mean, I think and then having the DualSense feel in your hands.
Yeah.
Having the haptics there.
Yep.
Having the right feel of having a PlayStation 5 controller.
Exactly. In my hand. It's not streaming to an iPad or something.
Yeah. Because I'm having to use a DualShock 4.
Right.
For my iPad, and it I don't know. It's hard to go. The DualSense feels so premium and nice in your hand, and then you get something like the DualShock 4, which just feels cheap at this point, if I'm being honest.
Honestly, to me, the Portal feels like the next step in the iPad streaming and the phone streaming and all that, because this is a device specifically made for gaming. It's dedicated, and it has all the haptics and the orthographic stuff that a game device should have.
We'll have to do a deep dive when you get your hands on yours.
We definitely
I can't
will.
wait to hear all about it.
Okay.
So since I wrapped up Final Fantasy 16, I thought I'd jump into something a little lighter. I've only been playing it for a day and a half or so, but or I should say I've only played maybe about 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But Super Mario Brothers Wonder,
Mm-hmm.
which has just been a breath of fresh air from like the serious dramaticness of Final Fantasy.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, I would say it wasn't very melodramatic, Final Fantasy 16. Like, it didn't feel like over the top, like rolling my eyes. Like, the performances were really well done in that game.
Mm-hmm.
They felt authentic. Kudos to the cast, the English voice cast, the main voice cast for the game, for doing a good job. And, the writing, too, of course.
Right.
But anyways, jumping into Mario has been a lot of fun. I've completed the first world, I guess you could say. I've done all the levels. In each level, there's the usual, like in most Mario games, you're usually, like, collecting a star or something at the end of a level, right?
Right.
So in this game, there's it's like some kind of fruit. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but there's usually between 1, 2, or 3 of these fruit things hidden in the level.
These fictional fruits or like...
Yeah, it's not a fruit. Every world has a different like flavor of this fruit, so to say. But they're basically the equivalent of like the stars in Super Mario 64.
Okay.
And you need so many to unlock certain areas and things and so forth.
I'm asking if they're like strawberries and apples.
No. These are definitely fictional, and they have like the little face on them, like that you're used to seeing on like the Mario
everything
stars.
else.
Yeah.
Right.
So and then there's also like 3 hidden purple coins in every level too. So I've been trying to like 100% each stage as I'm going along, but like last night I was playing and I had replayed a stage like 10 freaking times trying to find the thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, I could have just played a bunch more stages rather than trying to find the last purple coin.
In those games, I feel like it's okay to move on and come back.
Yeah, so I think my goal with this is I don't want to be stuck on Mario Wonder for like a month.
Right.
I want to just get to the end, experience most of the stages. I understand there's a bunch of post-game content in the game, like a bunch of really hard levels for like the hardcore Mario people.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to get to the end. I want to see the credits roll. So I'm going to try to not get too hung up on finding every secret in every stage. If I can just find the main fruit things that I need to progress through each stage, then I think that'll be okay. I don't need to find the purple coins for every single stage.
Yeah.
Aside from that, I haven't been playing anything else, but I did pick up several new releases. Some of them are sort of updated releases of games that haven't been out too long, but let's start out with the new stuff real quick. So I got Star Ocean, the second story R, which is a Square Enix published title and developed. Although I'm sure they probably had a third-party partner help them with the development. And this is a game that has been getting actually really, really good reviews too. And the original is known for being a cult classic.
Right.
It's got like almost 100 different endings.
It's
like
more than that.
No, I actually looked it up.
Oh.
It's about like 90 endings or something like
Okay.
that. I mean, maybe there's like micro variations of endings or something that you consider a different ending, but there's like 80 some, almost 90 like hard, unique endings.
I think there's like 12 different characters you can marry and something like that.
I mean, I don't know that they're all marryable, but I know there is a relationship system in the game, and I know that you can like influence it or.
I beat the original.
You play you played Second
PS1.
Story. Okay, so this had a PSP re-release, or the original Star Ocean 2 had a PSP re-release that I think added a new character that was cut from the original release due to time.
Gotcha.
And then this re-release is pretty much all of the it has all of the content of the PSP game, but like visually it's very different. It's now got an action battle style system. It's no longer straight turn-based.
It wasn't in the original.
I mean, my understanding is that it's more action than it was prior.
Okay. Well, In the
Like
original,
you now have like free roam around like an environment when you're like fighting.
that's exactly how the original was. You go into a random battle and it
Mm-hmm.
opens up like a limited area that you
Okay.
can run around
Okay.
and slash enemies and stuff.
Okay.
There
Well,
was never turn based.
my understanding is that it's more open, it's more actiony than it was prior. So
Okay.
yeah,
Whatever that means.
I don't know what it means, but I just know that it's apparently the combat has been expanded beyond what it was originally.
Okay.
But the story is the same. Like a lot of unique things from the original games are still present. Like there was a way to be like a thief and you could steal stuff and gain like the best weapon in the game almost immediately at the start of the game for like the sword using character. Stuff like that is there.
Right.
You can't recruit everyone, I'm told, so like you really have to be careful with like who you recruit because it'll lock out some other ones. And if you recruit too many people too early, it could lock you out from people available at the end of the game.
That was a big thing that was a problem for me when I played because depending on what decisions you make and what route you go, you will lock off. There's no way to 100% every item in the game. Like it's impossible.
Right. So yeah, for me, it does seem a little overwhelming. Like just everything I've been reading up on, it's like, wow, this game is ginormous, first of all.
It is.
And there's just so many ways that you can go right or wrong, depending on like the kind of player you are. Mm-hmm. Like if you're worried about missing stuff, it's just going to happen in this game.
Yeah.
Like there's no way to get around it. Now, I mean, from what I understand, you can't really mess up the game so bad that you can't beat it or anything like that.
Right.
But, if you were, like if you didn't talk to this one NPC during this brief moment in the story, then maybe it locks you out of like getting something later in the game,
Yeah,
So I think I'm going to wait until there's like maybe a comprehensive guide available for this game on GameFAQs.
When it comes to missable content in games, this has always been and has always remained my number one example of games with missable content.
I have a memory of we were hanging out maybe more than a decade ago, and you were telling me about this game and how crazy it was.
Yeah.
And so I've always been interested in it since then. Did you watch the trailer I sent you for this just to see what it visually looks like?
It's got that 2D, 3D.
Well, I mean,
quote unquote.
It's
style.
different than the HD 2D games that they have been producing, but it has these like very beautiful, like kind of natural looking environments, but then all the characters are
sprite
like pixelated.
Yeah.
But anyways, I think it looks absolutely stunning. And I understand that like they really like catered to fans of this game. Like you can play the game with like if you're a Japanese player and you want the Japanese voice cast, they have the original Japanese voice cast re-recorded all their lines from the PS1 release. And then for the PSP release, they had a different voice cast originally, and all of them also returned to re-record all of their lines for this release. Mm-hmm. And then in addition to that, I believe there's English. Anyways, it's something I want to jump into, but I'm like intimidated by it greatly.
You should be. I'm telling you that.
Yeah, and like when I see people talking about it online, they all seem to be like experts in the game. Like they played it a million times back in the day. And so it's almost impossible to jump into the conversation and be like, what the hell should I do,
Yeah.
It just seems to be the advice is like, don't worry about it. Just enjoy your first playthrough blind. Which is, it's hard for me to do.
Yeah.
As someone who likes to try to do as much of everything as I possibly can.
Who is obsessively prepared.
Yeah. I mean, like I don't have time to replay a single game a million times over anymore. Yeah. Like you used to when you were a kid. You'd get a game, and then that was your game for like the next 6 months.
This game is going to be very difficult for you to...
Yeah.
Okay. I'm
scared to unseal it even,
Yeah.
Okay, so like I said last week, I said it was going to be a really expensive week for me, and I wasn't lying. So the next game I have here is kind of something maybe nobody would have expected me to pick up. But it's Fashion Dreamer.
Mm-hmm. It looks interesting already.
Yeah, okay, so do you remember the Style Savvy games that Nintendo put out on the DS and 3DS?
Rings a bell.
Okay, so they had partnered... I'm embarrassed. I can't remember the name of the company that developed the Style Savvy games, but it wasn't Nintendo. Nintendo published it.
Sure, okay.
But this company... I guess Nintendo was no longer publishing their games for them. So they developed their own unique title. separate from Style Savvy called Fashion Dreamer. And I had always been interested in a style savvy game, even though it's like always been heavily marketed towards like the female audience. I just thought it would be interesting to finally check out something. I've heard from the reviews that it's not nearly as comprehensive as a style savvy game was. A lot of the style savvy games you would like have your own shop and things like that, and you'd have to like sell to like the NPC characters that would show up and help like design their outfits or whatever.
Gotcha.
Whereas this game, it seems to be a little more superficial, so that was kind of disappointing to hear. But you know, if nothing else, I really like the cover. It's really clean art. So I guess, I don't know, we'll see. Maybe I'll check it out, or maybe I can convince my girlfriend to play the game over her Thanksgiving or winter break so I can watch her check it out.
I like those kind of games. They're nice palate cleansers for when you're playing something intense.
Yeah, I think so. And, you know, I am curious. I mean, it is very clearly, like, girly and like, you know, like influencer. I understand this game has like this whole like, oh, you're trying to earn likes and things like that.
Okay.
So yeah, and I guess you can connect online and like share your NPC with other players, and like people can actually like browse and like all the
like
different,
Instagram,
like, almost like an in-game Instagram kind of a thing, which sounds interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like literally like hashtags and, you know, hearts and likes and chat bubbles and friend request looking buttons.
It's interesting. It has a different spin. It sounds like than those.
So I don't know. It's could be something, but I'm sure there's a lot of people who bought this hoping it was like the successor to Style Savvy, and I think some of them are kind of let down. Like, oh, this is different. Yeah. All right, so the next two games I have here are Pokemon Scarlet and Pokemon Violet. Now, you might be thinking these games came out a year ago. And they did, but these are the re-releases with the DLC expansion built into the cartridge. And I say that, but there's a little asterisk there, because so far, only the first DLC for Scarlet and Violet has been released. The second DLC won't be releasing until mid-December. So you might be wondering, well,
are they going to do another one?
Well, there's that part of me. So here's the thing: the cartridge has the unlock for both expansions built into the cartridge. So after you've downloaded the update, it'll be unlocked, and it won't have to do any kind of like internet check for your game if you're using these cartridges. But the fact remains that only DLC 1 is on the cartridge, not DLC 2.
Right.
So, as a physical collector, it's immensely disappointing that they couldn't just wait until the second DLC was out. Like I said last week, this is something they did for Scarlet and Violet, and they waited until both DLCs were out, and you know, you can have the whole game on cartridge. Unfortunately, with this case, these are basically, you know, only half the story here. So if they end up re-releasing it again, they reprint it, and let me tell you, these were $95 each.
Yeah, that's nuts.
This is nuts. So it's basically the price of the game, which is $60, and then $35 for the DLC, hence the $95 price tag. So even though you could probably find Scarlet and Violet for like $50 to $45 on sale at various places at any time. But as someone who has every single ESRB release of the main series Pokemon games, to me these are basically a different version of Scarlet and Violet. In my, you know, the cover is different, the art is unique to it. I gotta have it. And so I wasn't gonna risk, like with Sword and Shield, when they re-released those with the DLC included, you know, they became pretty obscure almost immediately. They were out of stock at a lot of places. They didn't print a huge amount of copies of them. So I'd rather have these than not have these and pay, you know, $200 sealed like they are for Sword and Shield right now.
I kind of generalize these kinds of releases in my collecting
What is like
manifesto.
Game of the Year releases?
I call them deluxe versions. Just to lump them in with, like, you know, releases like, you know, Link's Awakening DX and that kind of stuff. It's the same additional content release.
Right. I mean, for me, if the spine just says Pokemon Scarlet, Pokemon Violet, I would be like, well, these aren't really different games, but because I mean, you're right. They are the deluxe version of the game. They're the game of the year edition of the game with all the DLC included.
Mm-hmm.
You know, games do this all the time.
Yeah.
Although it's been historically uncommon for Nintendo to do that kind of a thing with their games. In terms of releasing a plus DLC kind
true.
of thing,
That's
that's
true.
something other publishers have been doing since like the PS3 360 era. This is relatively new for Nintendo, and they've been releasing like Zelda Breath of the Wild with DLC included, but only in Japan. They've been doing the same for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with all the DLC included, but only in Japan.
Yeah.
For some reason, the Pokemon Company, they have the autonomy to make this decision for whatever market they want to.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful that they've been, releasing ESRB copies of this in America. I really wish they had just waited until both DLCs were out and finished to print the carts. I understand why they did it, because they wanted it to be available in time for the holidays.
Right.
I think that's kind of lame.
Yeah, it is a lame excuse. It doesn't fly.
And, I hope they reprint them again next year with the DLCs fully included.
You're hoping to shell out another
$200? I mean, yes, sadly I am, because I don't know. So hypothetically, let's say they re-release the games again, right?
Mm-hmm.
With all the DLC included on cartridge. Should I sell these and just get the other two?
No, because that would be separate.
This is a unique variant, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, shoot.
Yeah, they got you, son. They got you.
Yeah. So that's what I was thinking too. I'd probably just keep them all. But yeah, it hurt a little bit to spend $200.
I would need to have those for my own, given my own collecting standards, those would be included.
Yeah.
So I'm envious.
Yeah.
I'll have to go get them.
I'm a Poke Simp, man.
What are they? Okay, how are these available? Are they available at retailers or just online?
I think you'll have a hard time finding them at retailers.
Okay.
You're gonna find them on Amazon. You're gonna find them on Best Buy, and like Target's website. I don't know that you're really gonna see these in stores anywhere.
Okay.
I mean, I've never heard of a $95 retail game for Switch before.
True.
So I don't think they put that on.
What about GameStop?
GameStop might have them in person. They might.
That's probably where I would go.
That's probably the only place you would find them.
Right.
But it would not shock me if most stores only got a couple.
Right.
But you can still find them on pretty much all online retailers. But if it's anything like Sword and Shield was, by the end of the year, you'll be struggling to find them.
Sure.
With Sword and Shield, what I did is I didn't even know that they had re-released them with the DLC included. Like, they were so quiet about it.
Mm-hmm.
I had found out about it like around Christmas time. And I was like, what the heck? This is a thing? Like, I need to have this. It's the complete version of Sword and Shield. And so I found that shortly after Christmas, a lot of people were selling maybe a copy that was, given to them as a gift for like $70, $80 on like eBay and Mercari.
Yeah.
So I managed to pick up a copy of each of them at somewhat of a discount. And like I said last week, they're now going for like $200 each sealed.
Yeah,
which
that's
is
crazy.
Absolutely nuts.
Do you have to have these sealed, or are you going to keep yours sealed?
Yeah, I mean, I already purchased the DLC digitally for Violet version. Mm-hmm. I haven't purchased the DLC for Scarlet. I don't know that I'll need to. I know with Scarlet and Violet, they kind of incentivized you to purchase the DLC for both because for the first DLC, for Sword and Shield, they incentivized you to buy the DLC twice because Urshifu, the mythical Pokemon from the first DLC in Sword and Shield, had two versions, and you had to make a choice which version of Urshifu you wanted it to evolve, what version of Kubfu evolved into two different Urshifu forms. So, naturally I picked up the DLC on both so I could get each variant of Urshifu.
Right.
It remains to be seen if the final DLC of Scarlet and Violet will try to make that same incentivizing thing. The first DLC hasn't done that, thankfully.
Right.
So I haven't felt the need to pick up the DLC for Scarlet. I might consider picking up the DLC. I might consider opening the Scarlet one if there is like a DLC exclusive Pokemon. But a part of me would rather keep it sealed and just pay $35, which
that's just
it's just the amount of money
Quick question about Cub Fu.
Yeah.
Because you get 2, right? 1 for each version. You need 3. Because you got 2 forms of Urshifu and you want to keep a Cub
That's true.
Fu.
So what I did was I had a second save file that I ran through the game on just to get to the start of the DLC. Because you can access the DLC
before you beat the
exactly.
Right.
So I just had to get up to the point where, and then I just got Cub Fu, and then I sent it to home. I never thought about that save file again.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it did involve me playing about 5 or 6 hours of Sword or Shield again on a different profile.
Yeah.
To get access to Cub Fu. But yeah, kind of ridiculous. You had to get 3 of them.
And they didn't even give you that.
Yeah. So anyways, we're already at the 35-hour mark, and we haven't even talked
35 minutes.
35-hour. Oh my god, that's ridiculous. Imagine, dude, a 35-hour podcast, the file size.
Forget it.
I don't think we'd be able to upload it. So we're at the 35-minute mark. So let's jump into the news. And I'm going to take lead on this first story here. Shortly before or after we recorded last week's episode, it was announced that Bungie... Well, it wasn't really announced. A bunch of employees just went to work and found out that they were being laid off. So Bungie, the developer of Halo and the Destiny franchise, announced that they were laying off about 8% of their workforce, which is 100 people or so.
So right off the bat, here we go again with another round of layoffs in the industry.
And this isn't the only round of layoffs this week. This was just the most notable round of layoffs that I saw.
Yep.
And so Bungie was acquired by Sony last, I think it was February or March of 2022. And what's interesting is that Bungie told employees back then that no one would get let go because of the acquisition by Sony. And that's probably still true.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought it was 2019.
No.
Okay.
No, it was early 2022. This is a fairly recent acquisition. The last 2 or 3 years have been like an acquisition battle. Mm-hmm. But this is definitely something that's happened.
I say that because some of the articles covering it mention 2019, but also your notes here say 1.5 years ago.
So it is the year 2023, almost the end of 2023. So if we run the math real quick, 1.5 years ago is early 2022.
Okay. You're right.
You okay with that?
Yeah, okay.
All right.
You've convinced me.
So 2022, we just got Rick looking like a goof.
I'm just trying to make sure this stuff's accurate.
Yes, it definitely happened in 2022. I followed this story pretty closely back then. I don't play Destiny anymore, but I was a huge Destiny player.
Yes, you were.
Almost 2,000 hours on the original Destiny.
I remember giving you a bunch of my can tabs from Red Bull when they had that.
Red Bull or Rockstar. There was some kind of promotion they had, and I was like, Rick, you need to buy Red Bull for me.
I think both of them did.
At various points.
Different times,
Yeah, so I remember, I don't even remember what damn tabs got me.
It was like,
some cosmetic thing or something, no doubt.
I don't even know if it was that. I think it was just in-game items.
Oh, okay. Well,
like
probably didn't amount to much of
stuff.
anything, yeah. Again, Bungie, even a first-party Sony studio, is not immune to this troubling industry trend. Bungie claims that the layoffs are due to all-time low player sentiments, low pre-orders for the next expansion, The Final Shape, and revenue targets being missed by 45%. Now, these are internal revenue targets set by Bungie themselves, not by their parent company, Sony.
Question about these statistics. Are these regarding specifically Destiny or all Bungie?
Well, Bungie only has one product on the market, and that's Destiny 2. I mean, technically Destiny 1 is still available to play, but I can't imagine it's creating that much revenue, and I wonder how long it is before they pull the plug on those servers to begin with.
Gotcha.
Now, like some notable people were let go. Like you can clearly see that Bungie was not just targeting like low-level new employees. They were targeting some people who had been there a long time, some people who were probably pretty expensive, including long-time Bungie composer Michael Salvatore. He had been with Bungie since 1997. He'd worked with them on essentially every single project they had ever put out.
Yeah.
And so that was shocking. And it wasn't just Michael Salvatore. There was Michael Salvatore's protege, who was also a composer, was also let go.
Gotcha.
And
That's just sad that their legacy composer.
Yeah. I mean, they had one other composer who had worked on Halo and the original Destiny, and famously there was like a lawsuit and he was fired. I cannot think of what his name is. It's like something Marty O'Donnell.
Okay.
That's what it is. Yeah, there's a big feud between Destiny and Marty, or Bungie and Marty, and now Michael's gone, so like none of the original composers at Destiny are still there. They're clearly probably going to be leaning heavily on their new talent to, do composition work for the games. Now it's probably likely that Michael had already finished work on this Destiny expansion,
Right.
which is touted to seemingly be the final Destiny 2 expansion.
Okay.
They've said there's going to be small story bits for Destiny in the years to come. But given that we know that pre-orders are down, player sentiments are low, and their revenue targets are missed, it wouldn't shock me if this is the end for Destiny, which is kind of crazy to think about because they had such a massive hit on their hands at one point.
Right.
And we're only next year will be a decade of Destiny, and to think that it's basically over for Destiny is kind of crazy to think about. Their next game is called Marathon, and it's a throwback to a game they developed a long time ago, also titled Marathon. It's apparently a multiplayer extraction shooter, and that's kind of a popular genre of game at the moment, especially on like the PC space.
Right.
I think it all started with an Ubisoft like Rainbow Six Extraction or something like that. And ever since then, a lot of people have been making extraction shooters, and apparently it's scheduled to get really big next year. There's like 3 or 4 supposedly coming to market in the next 2 or 3 years.
Right.
And so Bungie's jumping into a very a soon-to-be populated space. No promises of success there, when you're chasing a trend like that. I don't know. Now I'm kind of worried about Bungie. Like their Destiny seemingly kind of circling the drain a little bit.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, Destiny is very much one of those games as a service type.
Oh yeah.
Structures. It's hailed as being one of the best, design wise. It makes sense that a live game like that is going to die at some point.
Yeah. I mean, just probably a lot sooner than anyone expected. It makes me wonder, is Bungie ready to just kind of put the game in maintenance mode and just kind of maintain the servers and do little things here and there just to appease? I mean, even if there's only, if their revenue target was missed by 45%, that still means that they made 50% of the revenue that they were hoping to make, essentially. Right. So that means there's still probably a good size of, a loyal player base that's still there for the game.
Right.
But, can those people sustain the game long term enough to justify the amount of people they have working on the game? This would indicate no.
Right.
And, a part of the, another piece of news out of these layoffs is that they've delayed the Destiny 2 expansion, the final shape, multiple months from February to June, which is going to make player sentiments even lower.
You're right.
And now you're asking players who have pre-ordered the game for almost a year now.
That doesn't help their problem with the sentiment at all.
And then Bungie's next game, Marathon, has been pushed back from sometime in 2024 into 2025.
Yeah. So
and a lot
delaying their possible solution to their problems.
Yeah. I mean, they have to hit it out of the park with this expansion. Like, the word of mouth has to be, so good that you pull back in, these 45% of players who haven't been spending money the last, quarter or whatever. They need to come back to the game. They need them back. Right. I won't ever be going back to Destiny.
Right.
I got out.
Yeah, you're out.
I got out.
I can't see them never releasing assuming Bungie, survives this. Mm-hmm. I can't see them never releasing a Destiny 3 at some point, though.
It's interesting because originally Bungie never wanted to make Destiny 2. they had an agreement with Activision that required them
to do
to
it.
put out a Destiny 2. Destiny was originally supposed to be like FPS console version of World of Warcraft, where it would just get expansions ad infinitum.
Gotcha.
You know?
Okay.
But Activision, they had an agreement with them when they were still their publisher before Bungie bought back the rights from Activision.
Mm-hmm.
And so they made Destiny 2 and they were kind of stuck with it. And from what I understand, over the last several years, they've been adding in old content from Destiny 1 back into the game. But at the same time, they do this thing called vaulting, where they take content that's in the game and they remove it from the game. You can no longer access it, and they put it in the vault. And then they occasionally cycle old and new content in and out of the game, which to me is mind-blowing. You're paying for like an expansion. Let's say you paid $40 for this new expansion. And then 2 years later, they tell you, oh, that content's going to the vault, guys.
Right. Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, that.
Can you imagine if World of Warcraft was just like, hey, remember this huge new area we gave you? All these raids, all these dungeons?
Would that scenario you just put forward happen, though? They would do that 2 months after an expansion comes out with the content that they just released? Or would
No,
they...
it would be a chunk of time. I mean, still, that to me, as a player, I couldn't tolerate that.
I get that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
I played Destiny 2 at launch. I beat the raid. I beat the raid on the hard mode, which got me the platinum trophy, and then I was like, I'm done with this game.
Right.
It was crazy. My raid group that I had from Destiny 1 carried over to Destiny 2, and when we finished the first raid on hard mode, like, everyone stopped logging in. It was crazy. The game was in a rough place. I heard it had gotten better, but now it seems like it's in a rough place again. I think they had an expansion that came out either late last year or early this year, and players are just seemingly not enjoying it.
Was it broken, or was it...
I don't know if it was broken. I think it was just like, you pay $50 for this content that lasts about like 3 hours. This like new story content that lasts about 3 hours, and then you're just repeating the same grind over and over again to like try to get little micro upgrades on your gear.
Right.
And then and then you do the raids, and then that's it. I don't know. For me, Destiny 1 was like perfect, and then Destiny 2, I always thought, I blamed Activision. I was like, Activision screwed up a good thing.
Right.
Why didn't they just let Destiny 1 continue?
Right. You're probably right. You're probably correct.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that's
I don't know.
right.
Maybe Bungie would have done this weird vaulting thing anyways back then. But, I remember hearing about that after I'd already lapsed, and I was just, I let out a guffaw.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm sorry? They're doing what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I cannot imagine losing access to something that I paid for.
Right.
That's just ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. One thing I want to mention too, reading about, because obviously Michael Salvadori got let go, who was the legacy composer for Bungie, so not just concerning Destiny,
right?
Concerning Halo and everything Bungie's ever done. I assume Oni on PS2, because Bungie and Rockstar collaborated.
He probably worked on that.
Aside from him, the other people that were part of the layoff that I saw, I don't think they all are this, but because whenever layoffs happen, my first and biggest question is always who,
right?
And I saw social media leads mentioned, multiple, and I saw community managers were mentioned.
I saw that some engineers were let go.
Okay. So that gets more into the development side,
yes,
potentially.
It wasn't just... 100 people were talking. It can't just be community management.
Right. Like, there are other non-development roles.
Right. This wasn't like HR people. This wasn't like accountants.
Even QA is not necessarily part of development.
QA is probably...
Some of it is.
Dude, you just made a bold
I'm not saying that QA
is a hot button issue in the game scene.
Well, when it comes to testing, no, you're not developing anything. When it comes to debugging, yes, you are.
Okay, well,
that's my opinion, but I'll put it out there. I don't care whatever.
Testers are often seen as the
I'm not
the roaches.
I'm
of
not
the
crapping on
studio.
testers. I
Yeah.
love game testers. Like, they're necessary. You have to have them.
I mean, without them, your game is not good.
I am only saying that game testers are not part of development, which I would also say about audio.
Right,
In
but
some
wouldn't
states.
you say that a game tester maybe would provide feedback for a suggestion of how to do something rather than the way that it's been designed? And then
They
you
are
might,
supplying bug reports, but they are not debugging the game. The people who are debugging the game deserve the credit.
right, but what I'm saying is someone who's a tester isn't just saying there's a bug here. A lot of times they want more than like there's a bug here. They want like feedback on the gameplay loop. And so if there's like a consensus
So
amongst
that's
the testers,
UX. That's getting into what's called UX, which stands for user experience.
right?
And yeah, that's very important. You have to
Right.
have that, but that doesn't necessarily make it part of the development process. Like, you're not playing an instrument in the band,
Right.
but you are handling the audio, video,
Right.
you know.
But I mean, feedback that comes from testers results in a game changing from how it was originally envisioned in some cases. To me, that's being involved in development.
I'm not saying you're not involved in development. I'm just
Okay.
saying you're okay. You're not creating any assets. They're getting applied to the
They're
development
not,
of the
they're
game.
not drawing anything.
Taking screenshots, playing the game constantly, jumping at a wall 50 times until you fall through isn't easy. You have
Right.
to be a certain kind of person to be able to do
Yeah.
that.
I don't think I could do that.
And writing out bug reports is more than just there's a bug here. Of course, they have to provide screenshots. They have to provide detailed information about the level, what happened specifically. Usually, testers have some education on like game code and how colliders work and how other game objects and game prefabs interact with each other. Things like this. I'm not saying they're not educated. I'm not saying they're not important. I'm not saying they're not 100% necessary. I'm just saying that they're not creating assets.
I agree.
part
They're
of
not
development.
creating assets, yes. But I would say they're a part of the development process.
Well, you could say the media is part of the development process because they contribute.
No, that's
reports.
marketing. That's marketing.
Okay, but
Yeah.
you get my point.
Sure.
Like, they're not, they're not part of the core team that builds the game.
Right, and that's why they're often treated like second-class citizens in studios.
I don't think they should be.
They're relegated to.
They are
like-
not second-class citizens.
Right, but unfortunately, that's what happens at a lot of studios.
Right.
From just things that have come out over the years.
I'm just being, real and factual about the
Okay.
matter.
Right. But because of the reasons, like you said, they are treated like second-class citizens at a lot of studios. And sometimes they are first on the chopping block. When money needs to be saved, they're like, well,
Their talent is probably the easiest to replace, unfortunately for them.
You think so?
I do.
Like you said, it takes a very special kind of person.
It does. Oh, definitely. I would say that I would put community managers and social media managers
Okay, yeah.
ahead of them on that list.
Because that role, the social media, the community stuff, I feel like it's applicable across multiple industries.
You're right.
The community management thing.
It is, yes.
So it's like it's not just a game design. It's not just a game industry thing. Like Oreo has a freaking community manager.
Right. QA testing is applicable across all of tech.
Mm-hmm.
You could say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that the same person playing video games is the same person testing.
Not necessarily.
New Microsoft Word features.
But you can say the same about audio as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're getting way off topic.
So, real quick before we wrap this one up, I want to read.
Hold on before we wrap it up.
Okay,
Too.
all right.
There's a bigger picture to be had here. We're talking about Bungie going through a round of layoffs. We not long ago talked about Naughty Dog going through a round of layoffs.
Yeah.
And we're looking at multiple Sony-owned, PlayStation-owned studios going through layoffs.
Yeah.
So there's a pattern. There's something to be. I'm not saying Bungie's not taking full accountability for these layoffs, and I'm not saying that. I correct me if I'm wrong, but the layoffs at Naughty Dog did come from Sony. Is that correct? to say?
I don't know that we know that for a fact.
Okay.
It's interesting. Bungie has said that we're taking responsibility for these layoffs. This did not come from Sony telling us to do this.
Right.
Now, maybe Bungie felt that Sony would want to see these layoffs happen.
Right. Right.
And so they did it to sort of appease them from any other kind of judgment being handed down to them. Maybe they thought this would be easier to do themselves rather than have Sony come in and say, we want you to lay off 20%.
Right. Right. And also what they decide to do may, Sony might tell them 200.
Right. Exactly. So maybe they thought this would like put a Band-Aid on it,
right.
And hopefully they can right the ship before it gets worse.
Appease mom and dad, before you.
So let's not, even though Bungie's taking credit for the layoffs,
right.
Saying, hey, this didn't come down from Papa Sony.
And even if there was no directive from Sony, Bungie is still a child of Sony.
Yeah.
They're going to do what, their decision. The fact that they are a subsidiary of PlayStation is going to guide their decision making.
It's interesting, though. I do think Bungie maybe has more autonomy than, say, Naughty Dog does.
Probably. They probably negotiated. I know, every developer wants to keep creative independence. Bungie really wants to keep
all their games will still be able to publish on whatever platform they want to. Sony has not restricted them to only publishing new games on PlayStation.
If we look at the history of Bungie, Microsoft bought them back in the 2000s. They bought their independence back from Microsoft.
They signed a deal with Activision to publish their games. Yeah. Then they bought back that right from Activision, and then they sell themselves to Sony.
Right. So they bounced all over the industry. It's very obvious that they value their creative independence. They're willing to buy themselves back.
Now, if you're Sony, are you like, oh my god, did we make a mistake purchasing Bungie? They're missing their revenue by 50%.
I read, actually, because I want to put numbers to this.
Sure.
That purchase was some sources say 3.6, some say 3.7 billion.
Right. So, 3.5 to $4 billion this purchase,
of which 1.2 billion was specifically for staff retention.
Right.
So that's interesting.
That to me says
that we want the Bungie team.
Right.
We're not just buying the company. We want the people there.
Right.
To
which
stay.
Means that people got paid.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyways, just an interesting pattern I noticed between Naughty Dog. I don't know what's going on with Sony Santa Monica these days, if they got layoffs.
Rumor has it that they're going to be unveiling DLC for God of War Ragnarok very soon.
Okay.
I don't have any source on that, to quote right now, but that's the latest on Sony Santa Monica. They otherwise seem stable. Mm-hmm. There's long-standing rumors that they're working on some kind of game set in space or a far-flung planet or something like that. Mm-hmm. Their next game seemingly won't be God of War 3. Although it's possible they may have two teams working on games simultaneously at Sony Santa Monica. I'm not totally sure if they're on that two-team model or if they're just one game at a time kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So CEO of Bungie, Pete Parsons, put out a statement. I love how his name on X is in all lowercase letters.
Mm-hmm.
Very respectful. Today is a sad day at Bungie as we say goodbye to colleagues who have all made significant impact on our studio. What these exceptional individuals have contributed to our games and Bungie culture has been enormous and will continue to be a part of Bungie long into the future. These are truly talented people. If you have openings, I would highly recommend each and every one of them.
You're right.
That last bit about these being talented people and you should hire them was an added on tweet to his original statement.
Oh, okay.
Which to me is like, well, if they're so talented and you would highly recommend them, then why didn't you keep them, Pete?
Right. Yeah, hard decisions have to be made when you're a CEO, unfortunately.
I guess, yeah. Now, Pete's not a game developer.
He's a suit?
He was someone who was hired at some point in Bungie's history to run the studio.
Gotcha. Not a founder, I'm guessing.
No, he's not a founder of the studio either. He was brought on at some point as a suit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need
So empty words from Pete
we
there.
need a chief executive suit.
You know what? I'll take Pete seriously if he's willing to handwrite a letter of recommendation
for each
to
one
every
of
single 100 employees that he let go. Until that happens, I don't believe a word that dude just said.
That's not a hard ask. We're not asking for him
What
to...
is Pete doing every day?
Yeah, right.
Probably not much.
No, he's probably showing up for 2 hours in his designated parking spot.
It is,
know,
Tesla Model X.
Yeah. I mean, not all suits are bad, not all CEOs are bad, but
Pete, come on, do better.
Come on, Pete.
Where's those handwritten letters? All right, so we're gonna move on from Bungie. I guess we can maybe do one or two more stories before we take a break. We're already at the hour mark.
One more.
All right, so let's jump in. I'm gonna let Rick take lead on this one.
So Atari has been on a little bit of their own acquisition spree. Atari's been making some big swings that are kind of surprising to see, given what I've seen of Atari over the past, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years.
Which has
decade.
not been much.
Not been much. But
other than questionable decisions.
Yeah, that's what I mean, is questionable decisions. But more recently, I'll get into that too. Atari has been on a bit of their own... sorry.
You're repeating yourself a little bit.
They bought 2 companies. They bought Night Dive Studios and Digital Eclipse, which is a developer going back to the early 1980s.
Oh, is that true? I didn't know they went back that far.
Yeah.
Okay.
They developed on PC at the time.
Okay.
I think a few Atari consoles.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're not like... It's kind of surprising. I did not think Atari had the funds to do something like this.
Yeah, I mean, there's no dollar amount that anyone has publicly heard. I can't imagine. It was probably in the millions.
All I know about Atari's finances is that their Atari VCS console, they had to crowdfund it 4 times.
Well, you know what? At least the Atari VCS actually came to market, unlike the Television
100%. 100% on board with that. For, if you can call it, it's like an open sandbox machine, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it has a digital storefront, apparently.
Really?
You can buy things on it.
I'm not knocking it. I'll own it. I'd buy it. I haven't, but I would get one.
The Atari VCS, for those who don't know, is like it's Atari's new console, I guess you could say. It's not like it's not meaning to compete with anything major like Nintendo, Sony, or PlayStation, but it does have its own library of games. I don't know that it does physical games. I think it's all digital.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's correct.
So Night Dive Studios, the one they bought, I believe, last year, they're known for putting these really high quality remasters of like old school, I say this affectionately, boomer shooters.
Mm-hmm.
So like, all the first person shooters from the 90s, they put together, like they did the remakes, the remasters of like the Turok games,
mm-hmm.
And a bunch of other titles, and they continue to just constantly put out like acclaimed remasters that keep the authentic look and feel of the original game while modernizing them, making them accessible, and improving. Like a lot of these old games ran at like really crappy frames per second,
right.
Or they would have to have all these like fog effects to like keep the frames up
12
high.
frames per second when there's like more than 4 characters on the screen.
Yeah, so now these games run really well. They're available. They look like the original game did, but they also look nice on like a new console.
Mm-hmm.
And they're pretty well regarded. Like people look to them as like, this is how, if you're going to remaster an old game and you want to keep its authentic look and feel, you go to these guys to do it.
Right.
But yeah, they specialize specifically in the boomer shooter genre. And now Digital Eclipse, they also work in the the remastering of classic games. I think last year they put out the Atari 50th anniversary collection. Crazy to think that Atari has been around for 50 years.
Yeah.
And that was really well regarded. It had this like built-in sort of like documentary sort of timeline thing going, like almost like a digital museum where you could also play the games featured in the museum.
Right.
This Atari 50
Right.
collection. And then very recently they've put out the they have this sub series they're calling the Gold Master series, where it's literally a playable documentary where the idea is that you're purchasing a documentary, but it has these sort of like different playable aspects to it, including like prototypes that have never been available before, as well as like remastered, updated versions of the game that they've like created specifically for this release. And the first one that just came out earlier this year was the making of Karateka or Karateka.
Karateka. It's pronounced both ways by the developers.
And you know, that game is famously made by Jordan Mechner, who would later go on to create The Prince of Persia.
Right. Yep.
And so both of these studios have a focus on remastering games from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, which is exactly what probably Atari is looking for. It's like perfect for them. You know, and I don't know, like to me, I take from this that like Atari is like, it seems like they're building towards something. Like, they can't just be acquiring.
I think they're switching directions. They're trying to get into a groove.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about the administration situation within Atari, but I can tell you that during the VCS and all the prior, their Bitcoin, their cryptocurrency, I think it was called Atari Token, their stuff with Roller Coaster Tycoon, some drama there. One of the prominent people was Michael Arts. I think it was I might not be correct, but I think it was the chief financial officer of Atari at that time. I'm not seeing any. I was actually pretty familiar with some of the top brass names at Atari because I was following some of the stories closely. Looking at their roster now, I don't see the same names.
Yeah, there was some kind of change of hands somewhere in the last like 2 years or so. Like long gone are the days of building an Atari hotel in Las Vegas, which I'll be honest, I saw the concept art for that, and it looked really cool.
It looked cool. It would have been like, because I mean Atari with their casino game approach and stuff, I could see that working out.
But I would rather have this Atari than that Atari. For sure.
Yeah, 100%. And they've seem to be making some really good decisions, in my opinion. Cartridge re-releases, as expensive as they may be, and we can talk about that. The 2600 Plus console.
Right, so the Atari 2600, earlier this year, they put out a new version of the 2600, which is their classic console that everyone knows them for.
Their biggest success.
And the 2600 Plus is a modern re-release of the Atari 2600. It'll play your old cartridges. It'll play reproduction cartridges.
And I'd love to see like Atari publishing homebrew games, you know, as official
I think
titles.
they are.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think they are.
That's what they need to be doing.
They are releasing officially licensed new 2600 games now.
Perfect.
Which is awesome.
That's what they need to be doing.
Like, could you imagine if Nintendo was like, hey, we're going to get into the business of publishing new Game Boy games? Like, that would be crazy.
It'd be even better, and they might be doing this, if they did put them on modern consoles as well, you know, because...
there might be digital releases of some of these new games as well.
And that's all they would need for that.
I mean, it's going to be a hard ask for people younger than 50
to play that.
To like say, hey, spend $15 on this 2600 game.
Right. I mean, their pricing is obviously important too.
Yeah.
It can't be ridiculous.
I feel like Atari, with their cartridge re-releases, which they've been selling on their own, I've seen them on Limited Run's website, they're selling these really premium cartridges with like, you know, a bunch of extraneous stuff.
Box and stuff.
For like $100.
Yeah, that's a lot.
To me, like, they're clearly... This is one thing where I'm like, well, it's a little questionable. You know, they're still seemingly chasing that, like, 50-plus guy who's got more expendable income and wants to relive, you know, his childhood from the 70s.
Right. They could focus on remakes of some of their old, you know, some of their old classics.
Yeah, there was something that they put out. I think it's called Atari Mania, or something to that effect. Where it's like, do you remember Nintendo did those NES remix games? I think it was on 3DS, and it was almost like they made a bunch of micro games out of their old like NES games, and you'd have to like do a bunch of them in a row.
Yeah, right.
I think they were promoting it at that Best Buy event we went to for Super Smash
Atari
Bros.
could go that route.
No,
like,
they did. They put
did.
out a game called Atari Mania.
I'm talking about like completely remaking a modern version of like some, Wing Commander, whatever they own.
Oh, okay. So you're saying like make a AAA version of like
yeah,
classic Atari
Space
game.
Invaders or whatever it is they
okay.
own,
I don't know that these acquisitions would help them accomplish
Probably
that.
not. I'm just riffing on like what they could do to like
because
this is the right direction. I feel like, at least. I don't know about the acquisitions, but there are other recent decisions.
No, I think these acquisitions are a really good fit for Atari.
Yeah.
They make sense. They don't seem like acquisitions just for the sake of acquisitions.
Right.
Like they seem like these guys will help Atari be better. Now, Digital Eclipse says that they will still have autonomy to work on non-Atari projects. But now Atari is their parent company. So it benefits Atari either way, whether they're working on something that's Atari or not working on something that's Atari. It still benefits Atari now.
Atari needs to put out a really good Roller Coaster Tycoon new title and do it right.
Roller Coaster Tycoon 1 and Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 are like perfect games to me.
They are, yeah.
Like I played those so much.
They need to do it right.
PC.
They need to do it right.
Yeah, because the recent Atari Roller Coaster Tycoon
it was on Wii or
games,
something, and it was terrible.
I mean, I think there's a Switch version now. They're bad.
Yeah.
They're nothing like the original.
Right.
They're,
Don't try to do it yourselves. Get help. But
Yeah.
that is like, I think, if you were going to have a AAA game, that would be...
Oh yeah, man. Do you remember like all the cheat codes for like you could name different NPCs like certain
I didn't really...
names?
That was mostly PC in the beginning.
Okay,
It just wasn't in my library.
Gotcha. Yeah, I played both of those on PC in my tweens a lot.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so...
I respect it. Don't get me wrong. I respect that franchise.
Anyways, I'm excited to see Atari continue to kind of delve back into their back catalog and just embrace who Atari is. And, I want to see them succeed. And, the 2600 Plus, it's very reasonably priced. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's like $125 or something like that.
I should just go buy one. I have an original 2600, but it's not hooked up right now. This would be pretty convenient and more reliable.
Putting in an original 2600, you got to get like converters and things for your TV to make it even happen, and there's going to introduce all this lag through the converters.
And not to mention, you're probably going to have to get like new capacitors replaced or whatever on the board and stuff. It'd just be more reliable to have modern hardware.
Yeah, and you're getting like an actual console from Atari. It's not like a third party, thing.
I have 25 plus Atari 2600 cartridges sitting at home.
Yeah, so you could just pop those suckers in.
Yeah.
I mean, you might need to clean the cartridges, but
yeah,
they should work.
They should work.
It's crazy how cartridges are still going strong.
Yeah.
From 50 years ago.
It might not be the biggest form of storing media, but it was definitely... It has its value.
Yeah. I mean, discs, I think, are more prone to rot and failure than cartridges are.
Oh, yeah. Because 95% of the cartridge is encased in a plastic
Exactly.
thing.
I mean, there's worry of... if, like, moisture or something gets in a cartridge, it can cause corrosion, which can, totally destroy the cartridge.
Don't stick it in water.
I think we got time for one more quick story before we break, yeah?
Sure.
Because we still have quite a bit to cover, so I think we should talk one more thing. So, Sega, they put out an internal Q&A on their company website. Just something for people to read, maybe to entice people to come work for Sega. I think is what the kind of goal is behind this conversation.
Okay.
But it's with, and I apologize if I'm getting these names wrong. The Q&A, the person answering the questions is Osamu Ohashi, the division manager of the Sonic franchise, and he stated that his goal, his ambition, is to surpass Mario.
Mm-hmm.
They want Sonic to be as big, if not bigger than Mario. They want Sonic to have his own area at Universal Studios Japan, just like Mario does. They want the Sonic movies to do as well as the Mario movie did. He says he wants all of this because he respects Mario.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he doesn't look at Mario as, like, the bad guy. This isn't the Sega of the 90s.
Right.
He just wants Sonic to compete on that kind of a level. So that's his goal. His team's goal is to get Sonic there. Now, I think that's ambitious.
It's definitely ambitious.
I think it's, nigh impossible.
I would love to see it. I'm here for it. I'm 100% here for it. Sega gave me my childhood. You might have been more on the Nintendo side.
It's interesting. My first console was a Genesis. The first one I had access to was a Genesis.
Yeah.
So
I didn't get a Nintendo console until the end of 64.
Are you including handhelds as?
No.
Okay.
That would be earlier.
I had access to my uncle's Genesis because he was like a teenager when I was a kid. So he lived with us. And so I got to watch. I watched him play a lot, and then I think one of the first games I remember playing, truly, is Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah.
And specifically Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was the one that I kind of gravitated to the most for whatever reason.
Gotcha.
And then I got the first thing that I owned was a Game Boy, just an original, the dark green DMG, the Play It Loud series of Game Boys. Which would have been early to mid 90s. It probably would have been like 95 or 96 that I got mine.
Mm-hmm. So my first console, and the one that started it all for me, started me on like a game development career path and stuff, was my Sega Genesis Nomad, which I got for my 8th birthday.
So you had that before you had a Genesis?
Yes, before I had anything. That was my first game console, and my first game was Clay Fighter on Genesis.
You still have that cartridge?
Yep, I do, and I still have my second one, which was Pac-Man 2: The New Adventure on Genesis. So Sonic came very soon for me,
right? And
I had all three of them, played the crap out of them, know every level by heart.
So, like, what led? Who bought the Nomad for you?
My parents.
It was a Christmas gift or something.
It was my parents, because it was going out of like fashion, and it was probably on clearance. And they got me that, but I still have it.
So the Nomad, for those that don't know,
was the Genesis portable version of the Genesis.
What year is this?
That played physical Genesis games.
Rough idea.
What, the year I got it?
Yeah.
1994? 93, 94?
So you're telling me you were 4 or 5 years old when you got this?
Maybe later. 97. Had to be at least. Okay. I mean, the earliest it could have been.
So you had no real exposure to video games prior
No,
to this?
This was my first game console.
You had never played any games at a friend's house or anything?
I mean, I had seen a video game, but no, I'd never
probably seen arcades at restaurants.
Yeah, of course.
That. Yeah.
I don't know why we're talking about this, but...
Well, why not?
My
Sonic and Sega, that brings back those good memories.
So anyways,
or not.
Yeah, Sega is, Sega is my childhood.
Okay.
I stayed with Sega all the way until I already had a Sega Saturn before I had my first Nintendo console.
Okay.
So yeah. Anyways, I'm here for it.
Right. I respect the ambition. I think it's a good goal to strive for.
I want Sega to give Nintendo a run.
I think
Nintendo's been on the top long enough.
I think if this guy actually thinks he can accomplish this anytime soon, he's probably delusional.
It's probably a dream for him, but I like people aiming high. I choose to aim high myself because I know that even if it is unrealistic, I will have shot as high
Right.
as I.
Well, you know what's interesting? He talks about the Mario movie, and prior to the Mario movie, the Sonic movie was the most successful video game movie ever.
Yeah, ever. And
So,
honestly,
and then the Mario movie came and kind of blew it out of the water 4 times over.
yeah, I regard. I mean, I haven't even seen the Mario movie for reasons.
I mean, they're different. They're two very different movies.
Right.
You know, like one is like totally 3D animated, and the other is set in like with human characters and stuff.
Real live action.
Yeah, it's live action, so to say.
Yeah, I want Sonic to come back.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You know, they release games, and they're very popular. For some reason, Sonic is eternally popular with young kids.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it doesn't matter what decade it is, young kids love Sonic
because he's cool. I'm okay.
Okay, you're
on
right.
On a core level. Here we go to like we're throwing it back to like 1993 now. On a core level, Sonic is cooler. He is a hedgehog with an attitude. Mario is a Italian plumber. Like,
okay, yes, Sonic looks cool.
Oh yeah,
like the spikes.
Yeah,
the attitude. Like he doesn't care. He doesn't got time for anyone.
Yeah,
but he's a good guy.
Yeah.
And yeah, he does. Just his visual look. Mario is more like, oh, cute, Pillsbury Doughboy. Let me poke his belly.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, Mario's a hero in everyone's mind,
right?
Ours included.
Respect where respect is due.
Of course. I'm not saying these things to crap on Mario. I'm saying these things to show the dichotomy between Mario.
Sonic looks like a badass.
Yeah,
that's not a curse word. So, like Sonic looks cool. Sonic looks edgy. It's crazy how timeless he is.
He was designed to do that.
Yeah, his goal was to be like the antithesis of Mario.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. Sega was like, we need to create our Mario, but make him better.
He came with a hardware update. Like, that was the blast processing of the Genesis,
Which was a pure marketing term. Meant nothing.
It was, but if you think about it, real or not, and the Genesis did have capabilities that, like, the Super Nintendo.
Sure, vice versa.
But that idea is, lent itself to Sonic's character. Like, he runs fast.
Yeah.
Because the Genesis is supposed to have blast processing.
Right. Like, if Mario and Sonic were in a race, well, at this point they have been in the Olympics several times together.
And, I mean, I'm also happy that Sega and Nintendo work together. I'm not sure how I feel about, like, Sega if they announced that they were coming back onto the console market, hypothetically speaking. I'm not saying that they are. But I don't know how I would feel about that if they came out with that. I am very happy to hear them say this. Even if it is not a feasible thing, to aim that high is to shoot high.
I agree. I want to see them blow people away again. I mean, they had Sonic Mania a few years ago, which did blow people away.
It was great.
It reviewed really, really well. Unfortunately, Sega seems to think that it's a mistake to release pixel art games, and so they're now saying that they don't want to do like a Mania 2. So they just had this new game come out, Sonic Superstars, which is a 2D Sonic, but it's done in a 3D style.
Right.
It apparently has the same physics and gameplay engine as Sonic Mania, so it plays similarly or the same, but it has like a
3D art
aesthetic. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a little disappointing for me. The fact that they won't do something else like Sonic Mania again.
I mean,
I'll never say never. There's a good chance they probably revisit.
Nintendo doesn't really make too many pixel art Mario games. They're not trying to go for old school Mario aesthetic.
They don't. But I think they're in a different situation than Sega is.
Of course.
Like, I think there's some people who have to... Some companies, some publishers have to rely more on nostalgia than, say, Nintendo does for a million different reasons.
Right. See Atari.
And I think Sega can lean on that.
Yeah, oh yeah, and
Yeah.
Sega's in a good position. They've been surviving. They gave up being a console holder, but they've been surviving in the industry and the ecosystem. They've maintained a pretty high status as a publisher.
I agree.
They're not in the line. Nintendo, well, Sega and Atari both are not in the industry spotlight.
I mean, Sega more so than Atari.
Exactly,
Yeah.
Sega more so than Atari. But they're also not, teetering on bankruptcy or something.
Like no one's forgotten about Sega.
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
Atari is more forgotten. They're trying to make a comeback, and I'm rooting for them.
The Atari property has been handed to different holding companies,
Right.
And it's kind of not really a game studio, and then it is sometimes.
It's more so now.
Yeah.
I mean, now they actually own studios.
Right.
That helps.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like branding wise, if you look at Sega and Atari, they're probably like in terms of like recognition.
Oh, both are legendary logos.
Yeah.
Legendary. You can't talk games without those two logos.
You walk around anywhere, you're gonna see someone in an Atari t-shirt.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Those two logos go on the same t-shirt as like the Nintendo logo.
Yeah.
They're that big.
Yeah.
Same with Namco.
But yeah, Atari has been coasting on a logo for 20 years.
Yes.
And now they're trying to get back into the game.
Exactly.
Whereas Sega has been actually in the game this
and
whole
all
time.
kind of these weird, sometimes sketchy projects that they announce.
Oh, yeah.
And just, the Atari Flashback was another thing which I think was not a bad thing,
Right.
but it wasn't what they needed.
Right.
But yeah, I'm happy with the direction Atari's going. I'm definitely happy to hear that from Sega. That means, because if you think about it, Sega, we've talked about this privately, they kind of seem to be positioning themselves to be bought out. Some
people suspect.
Some people suspect.
Yeah.
To hear them express so much pride in their identity and their legacy makes me happy. It makes me smile.
Now, there were a couple of other interesting points that came out of this Q&A beyond the aspiring to be big or as big as Mario. One of them was that 95% of Sonic game sales come from outside Japan, which means that the Japanese don't seem to really care that much for Sonic. They're not really as enthusiastic.
I'm not surprised. I think that the Genesis and the old school Sega had such a big impact on the United States.
I mean,
basically
during the 90s, Sega handed over control of the brand to America.
Well, they told them that and then reneged a few times and then kind of went to war with them.
But Sonic games were not just a Japanese creation.
No.
They were a collaboration between
not
North
at all.
America and Japan.
The Sega 32X was designed in America.
Yeah.
It was an American, system or peripheral library expander.
I think it maybe had to do a lot with the marketing back then. Maybe there wasn't so much of a console war in Japan as there was here in the States. But I think that console war legacy has had such a lasting impact on, people here in the States that Sega has remained, especially Sonic more than Sega, has remained such a huge icon here.
Right. And if you think of Sonic at his height, he, remember Sonic O's on the shelf at the grocery store?
Sure.
That's what Sonic, he was on everything. You can put him on anything.
Sonic still gets cereals.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
And he should. And he should get more than cereals. He should be on
Get
all kinds of stuff.
Fruit roll-ups.
He should be... Yes, please. I'll buy.
Green Hill Zone roll-ups.
I'll buy. If I'm going to buy fruit roll-ups, they might as well be Sonic. Sonic is a very marketable cartoon character.
Yeah. Yeah, beyond video games, he's got a huge appeal.
Oh, yeah. And the Sonic cartoons. I'm not even going to start on
yeah. I mean, dude, Sonic kissed a girl. A human girl at one point.
How many Sonic cartoon series has there been? There was the Deke cartoon.
Deke!
And then there was Sonic X or Sonic Advance or something like that.
Yeah, I remember Sonic X.
As an anime.
An anime?
Anime. That's... Anime, whatever you prefer. I see. If I say anime to Matthew, I get corrected, and if I say anime to you, I get corrected.
All right. Well, you're just in a lose-lose situation,
Yeah,
dude.
it's kind of not
You sound
fair.
a little. You sound a little too pinky out when you say anime.
Weeaboo.
Yeah, you sound
I
like
believe
a
is the
weeaboo.
correct term. I'm not, but
Okay, so the other fun, interesting piece of information to take from this interview was that Osamu Ohashi's second goal or other goal is to create Sega's second Sonic. And I say those two words with quotes. I don't mean that they want to create like Sonic's son.
a new Sonic.
Yeah, they're talking about creating a new beloved IP for all ages that the world will know all over. So, I mean, that is, if you thought beating Mario was hard,
Yeah,
this is even
because
harder.
his first goal wasn't enough to surpass Mario with Sonic. They're talking about creating another.
I mean, so
character.
Nintendo has Mario and they have Zelda. Those are probably their two biggest things, period. We'll be talking a little bit more about Zelda pretty soon.
Sure.
But now, so Sega's like, well, we need a second IP that is like just as big as Sonic is. Now, Sega has other beloved IP.
Yeah, they could.
At this point in time, like the Yakuza series or the Like a Dragon series, as it's known now, is probably their next in line for most beloved. But they don't have anything on the level of Sonic. And Yakuza is like an adults kind of game.
Yeah,
it's not really an
M-rated.
all ages
It's not really
affair.
Gonna work that way.
So I don't know. I'm very curious to see them. I'm sure they must have concepts for, another IP that could be on the level of Sonic. It's, that's hard. That's hard to do.
That's very hard to do.
I mean, Sonic is as recognizable as like a Pikachu.
Part of what makes Sonic and Mario is how far back they go. So coming out with something new doesn't seem to, in my brain, be physically possible.
We won't even know when they create this second Sonic.
Right.
We'll be in our 60s or 70s, and they'll be like, oh, that was their second Sonic.
Yeah.
Because that's how long it's going to take to get to that point.
Right. Unless they manage to breach into their, they get their, I don't know. This is the first one I like, this is kind of crazy. I think they would have much more success with this second goal in reaching into their backlog of how many, all the IPs that they own, the classics.
I mean, maybe that's what they do. I mean, Billy Hatcher is right there, man.
Yeah, they have a lot. They actually have quite a bit from Genesis and on. Like, even after they left the console scene, they still have new, old IPs that they introduced.
For sure. I mean, rumor has it that Sega's working on a new Jet Set Radio game.
They should be, because that needs a new installment.
I mean, we haven't had one since the Xbox, Jet Set Radio Future.
That's good.
Indie devs have kind of stepped into that space to fill that hole in the meantime. A crazy new game called Bomb Rush Cyberpunk came out from Team Reptile earlier this year to rave reviews as like the authentic successor to Jet Set Radio series.
Right.
But I'm very curious to see what Sega can cook up if that rumor holds true and they really are making a new one.
Right.
But we should jump to a break, I think.
I think it's time.
We'll be right back.
All right, so we're back, and our next story involves Microsoft. They announced that employees are going to be losing their access. Employees outside of Xbox within Microsoft are going to be losing their access to free Xbox Game Pass subscriptions, and over 200,000 employees are affected by this.
Isn't that insane?
Yeah.
Microsoft employs more than 200,000 people
are losing
worldwide
their benefit of free Xbox Game Pass.
Now this is I believe it's $16.99 a month. So it costs a little,
which is an increase to their previous price point,
right? Which just recently went up a couple dollars, I believe.
Yeah.
So it's now if you want to subscribe to Game Pass, there's no discount for buying a year. You only pay month to month. So it comes out to about $200 a year. I think the total is like 203 or something like that if you subscribe every month.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That's
and
right.
so like the only employees that'll get to keep this are ones that work for Xbox branding or like this one of the studios under the Xbox wing.
Right.
Everyone else that works at Microsoft will have to pay for Game Pass,
Yeah.
which now employees were taken aback by this news
Yeah.
and started being quite upset about
They're
it.
angry.
Now,
Go ahead.
if you're Microsoft, while $200 a year times 200,000 people, that equals $40 million.
Right. I'm going to object with you in calling this a cost because it's not costing Xbox anything to give permission to digital goods. I think that maybe you could say there's lost sales in there.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to be generous, I'm going to say 20% of those people would even...
Yeah, I don't think every employee of Microsoft is a gamer.
Right.
Or, all these 200,000 people are not playing.
Or at least enough of a gamer to subscribe. I'm a gamer. I don't subscribe.
Right. To subscribe to Xbox. Now, I do agree. But if they were all paying, Microsoft is essentially losing $40 million in revenue every year because their employees are getting it for free. Now, if you think about it, $200 per employees to keep them happy is nothing.
You're right.
That's not even like the cost of their health insurance.
Which it's, again, not even a real cost. Health insurance is a cost because that's something Microsoft actually pays for.
Like, this seems like a dumb decision.
This is a very dumb decision.
It's so dumb that, Microsoft Xbox head honcho Phil Spencer wasn't even informed of this change, and he was taken aback by the news. No one had told him that this was happening, and so he responded by saying that he understands people being upset and he's going to look into it. Employees went on like their internal message board and started complaining just publicly complaining amongst themselves that this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's such an insignificant number. And, the fact that people who are probably making over six figures easily, a lot of these people probably making over $100,000
Are you talking about the employees or the
employees?
Okay, yeah.
If you're working for a software developer, chances are you're probably making big money.
Even if you're working for like the Microsoft Windows Phone team or something, you're still getting paid well.
And, $200, I mean, just make your employees happy. Why would you make them mad? Now, understandably, Microsoft did just spend, almost $70 billion purchasing Activision Blizzard.
Right.
So they're probably...
We understand why Microsoft would maybe want to take some, cuts on cost. Right. But this is not...
Yeah.
This is not an ideal
All you're doing
target.
is pissing off your employees.
It doesn't make sense.
And $40 million is a drop in the bucket.
I refuse that number because it's not costing them $40 million.
Right, but I mean, I agree. I'm just saying, like, if Microsoft had thought they were all paying, well, they would all be paying for, that's the most money they could be taking in.
Right.
So, and even...
Realistically... They're probably missing
10 million, let's say.
If that.
Yeah. Now, there was an update to this story that I didn't have here in our notes. And apparently Phil was able to fix this.
Okay. Someone got fired.
Someone got fired or I don't know what happened. I don't know who made this decision. It was probably someone above Phil's pay grade even. So
like
I don't
a board
know.
of directors type?
Maybe, yeah, or like his boss or one of his boss's, associates or something said, hey, they're going to all have to pay for it. Like someone in HR was like, that's no longer a benefit beginning in 2024.
Right. I could see maybe HR having something to do with it.
Yeah, I bet you it was an HR thing. And so Phil got that fixed. And fortunately, all Microsoft employees will be able to retain that benefit. I was thinking, while not all Microsoft employees maybe take advantage of it, it wouldn't surprise me if, they maybe share that with family or say,
Sure.
"Oh, give me your account and I'll make your the account the one that gets the free Xbox or something."
Maybe
like that.
they were kind of taking on more of a Netflix sentiment and
Maybe.
feeling like people were sharing too much.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much account sharing you can or can't do with something like Game Pass.
Right.
Cause I don't subscribe. I don't know if they have any restrictions like that. But I gotta imagine there can only be like one person logged into that account, or one console set is like the primary console.
Right.
Something to that effect.
Or profiles,
Yeah.
probably.
But, good news for employees. It wasn't as bad as it was. Sometimes complaining does work.
It does. Yeah.
And it helps when your boss is on your side.
Yeah, that is kind of pivotal.
Yeah, if Phil wasn't in agreement with them, or they didn't have someone like Phil in their corner, it probably would have stuck. Now, they had told the employees that they would be able to purchase a discounted version of a Game Pass subscription from the Microsoft Employee Store. So they did have sort of a solution in place.
A lesser offer.
Yeah. So like they would still have access to a discount, but still it would cost them money. But
Right.
I guess they thought maybe we don't have to supply as much of this or facilitate it, and we bring in a tiny little bit of revenue some way. There was no word on how much this discount was. It never became known because the problem was resolved before the new year began.
Right.
So we've got another topic. I'm gonna let Rick take over on this one for now.
Sure. So we had a graphic come out by how do you pronounce it? Deka Tweets?
So Derek Strickland.
Okay, Derek Strickland released a graphic on X, formerly known as Twitter.
Now this graphic came out several months ago, but it came across my view.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was worth discussing.
Yeah. So what it shows is the overall gross income of all of the big three console holders, and how much of that gross income is net income or profit. And what we see is a breakdown of percentages between PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo. And what we see is PlayStation...
Well, hold on real quick.
Sure.
This data covers specifically July 2022 through March 2023.
Yes.
And this information is sourced from various things that were released publicly from the different, from Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo, as well as some information that did come from the Xbox leak from their big... I apologize if you're hearing the corn guy outside. He's honking his little horn, trying to sell some corn. We should probably go grab some. It's pretty good.
But yeah, so this is a compilation image of data from different sources and put out by the three major companies.
But some willingly, some not willingly.
Right. Yeah, via leaks in some case.
Yeah, but let's talk each one of them. So you take PlayStation.
Okay, so PlayStation made $18,743,000,000 in revenue, and $1,419,000,000 is profit. So a 7% margin for PlayStation.
That's pretty bad.
That's yeah. And
I get almost that good of a return on my
well,
money market
let's
account.
compare first before we
Right.
get into that.
So Xbox, they brought in $12,775,000,000 of revenue. So that's that's $6 billion less than PlayStation, but they made more in profit. They made $1,500,000,000 in profit, a 12% margin.
Mm-hmm. And then Nintendo made $11,826,000,000, so the least of the three.
The least of the three.
Their profit margin was $2,997,000,000, so $3 billion, which was a 25% profit margin.
So they made the same amount of money as Microsoft and Sony combined, practically.
Which
or
amounts
even more so.
That amounts to the highest
of the three.
Yeah, even the number, like even if you consider the gross income, being the least, regardless of that, the revenue number is 3 billion. PlayStation's is not even 3 billion, let alone Microsoft. So
Yep, Microsoft at 1.5 and PlayStation at 1.4.
So, I mean, basically, in conclusion, this is just showing that Nintendo knows what they're doing the best.
And they're the most efficient. It's interesting. I do wonder, people probably look at them as an outlier because they're not making 4K games.
Mm-hmm.
Their expenses are probably lower. They develop more games truly internally than anybody else.
Yep.
Whereas Microsoft and
the other two are paying third-party developers or developer subsidiaries. A lot of money to make games.
Right, and a big advantage I do think Nintendo has is that cost of living in Japan is significantly lower than in the United States and in Europe,
right.
Whereas where most of these two have their developers
and
at.
If you consider PlayStation and Microsoft, they're both in very, very high cost of living areas, their headquarters.
I mean, just being in the United States sets them apart. And I do think the wages of someone in Japan in the games industry is also a lot lower than someone in
Seattle.
The Seattle or San Francisco or LA or pretty much anywhere, But again, Nintendo probably has a really efficient... I mean, they've been around longer than both of these companies in terms of as long as they've been developing games. They have an efficient way of moving teams from one project to the next. There's never idle hands. They put out just a significantly higher number of games than anybody else does, even if their games don't necessarily sell as much. Because they're maybe not seen as these big budget tentpole games all the time.
Yep.
That's not to say Nintendo doesn't have any of those.
Oh no, they do. I mean, Tears of the Kingdom is huge.
Yeah.
They're not making small games by any means, but
they do make small and mid-sized
they
games.
Do, yeah. Oh, I'm not saying
Sony and Microsoft.
That's not what I meant. I meant that Nintendo is not just making only small games by any means. But if you consider PlayStation's titles, Last of Us Part 2, the new Spider-Man, these are big, giant cinematic Hollywood actors. Just they spend money on this stuff. I don't believe, this is my opinion, I don't believe that gamers really care. At least I don't. If Nolan North or whatever his name is.
I mean, Nolan North, I don't consider him a Hollywood actor, but he's as Hollywood as like a voice actor gets.
Bad example.
Yeah.
But like they do have Hollywood actors doing like the facial modeling and stuff for these characters and stuff like that.
Well, Kojima is known for
doing that stuff.
Getting like big name actors to get involved with his projects.
Do we care? Like as gamers, do we really care? I think if the voice acting is good, it's great. I don't need a big name.
I am in 100% agreement. I mean, the most egregious example of this is Kojima.
Yeah.
In his recent games, he's been obsessed with getting like real Hollywood celebrities and actors involved with his games.
We were talking about Death Stranding.
Death Stranding in particular. Yeah. Norman Reedus, he's a good pull. He's a cult actor. Even prior to The Walking Dead, he was in Boondock Saints, which is like a big cult
I've
film.
seen that. That's a good movie.
He's been around the scene. He's a good choice for Kojima, but I mean, like the new game, he's got like Elf, and Death Stranding 2, he's got like Elle Fanning in it. And I mean, one thing I thought was cool is like, it's not just actors. Like he put like Guillermo del Toro in Death Stranding, even though he just provided his likeness, not his voice or anything. I think it's cool to include like creative types, not just like actors,
Right.
But still, totally unnecessary.
Yeah, that's my point.
It doesn't sell me on the game.
It's super unnecessary. It doesn't sell anyone on the game, and it's very expensive.
Like, you just tell me the game is made by Hideo Kojima, and I'm interested.
Yeah,
I don't need a celebrity on the cover to sell it to me.
I think
he wants to hang out with celebrities.
Yeah, I think so, but even if, like, forget him as an exception, like, if we consider this kind of like the position of the industry in a way, especially around the PlayStation zone, they really want to appeal to the film industry and show that they're equal or whatever.
Yeah, I don't understand this.
And
I don't understand why people are so desperate. Like, it's almost like the games community wants to justify themselves to Hollywood.
right.
Like, we're big too. We're important. Why don't people pay as much attention to us?
Exactly. And maybe they're looking at the media when they get that kind of idea, but they're not looking at gamers, because gamers don't care. We don't want to be a part. No one's asking, from the gamer side of things, to be a part of the film industry or be on the same level as them or be part of the Oscars or whatever.
You know what? When I go to the Game Awards, I'm always like, what is with this, like, shoving in celebrities into the thing? And it's like the celebrity walks out on the stage and says this cringy story about how my kids are gamers, you know? And I'm just like, oh my God, do I need to hear this again?
That seems to be a thing.
I'll never forget when Michelle Rodriguez and Vin Diesel showed up to talk about the really horrible Fast and Furious game that Bandai Namco put out. Michelle Rodriguez was like, hey Vin, remember we were filming the first movie and we were playing Tekken when we were waiting for our
She
scene?
mispronounced Tekken. Wow.
Yeah, she couldn't say Tekken. She called it Tekken. I mean, it's just like...
That's unreal.
Did no one coach her before?
So you weren't playing it because you don't even know how to say the title. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
At the same time, I don't know if they see us as like normal people, gamers, that is, but we're not.
Right.
Historically, at least. I know things are shifting and all that.
Sure.
Historically, gamers were the outcasts. We were the nerds.
Yeah.
We don't appeal to norm,
we
mainstream.
We got away from the celebrity stuff.
Right,
we
exactly.
didn't want to be into that.
That was, if we take a high school analogy, that was the football players and the cheerleaders thing.
Right.
They liked the celebrities and the actors and all that. Gamers, the nerds, the geeks, that's not us.
Yeah.
That's not us. We're interested in science.
It's stories.
Yeah. And so this isn't making sense. And it's so expensive to bring these people on.
Well, with seeing this information laid out like this, maybe it makes sense that Jim Ryan is, saying goodbye.
Yeah.
Maybe Sony's like, dude, what the heck? 7% profit?
Yeah. As far as Sony's concerned, I almost guarantee without like sourcing anything that
supposedly
Jim Ryan had his administration was partially, wholly
to blame
responsible
for this.
Yeah.
I mean, I had heard that Sony's targets for this forecasted year are at 6%. Even less than this.
That's crazy.
So Sony's expected to make a lower percentage of
lower
income
profit margin
than they did this past year.
Why even? They bring in almost 19 billion and they walk away with 1 billion. Like, who sees that and says
that's sustainable?
Yeah, that's a success.
I mean, they made money. I guess that's good,
Yeah, but
I mean,
think about how big PlayStation is and all the costs that come with PlayStation.
Right.
1 billion isn't going to be anything.
Yeah, their expenses are way too great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe that's why we're seeing cuts at Naughty Dog. Maybe that's why we're seeing cuts
and
at Bungie.
And this is again another part of what we hate to see,
Yeah.
the developers bearing the brunt.
Exactly. For bad decisions on leadership roles, like none of the senior leadership at Bungie is losing their job.
No, of course
the composer, not. But I mean, sure, he's in charge of music.
But he's not a suit.
No, he's not a suit. He's a creative. So yeah, it's just interesting to put it all in perspective. I'm following this guy now. I'm curious to see if he'll put out more of these kind of easily digestible graphics for the next year if we can get our hands on. I understand that Nintendo and Sony are generally forthcoming with this information.
Yep.
Microsoft less so. Microsoft reports their big picture about Microsoft as a
Right.
whole.
They don't talk about Xbox.
Xbox individually, unless Xbox has like a really standout year, then maybe they want to highlight it. But like they don't go out of their way to say, "Hey, Xbox is just skating by right now."
Right. Yeah, pretty eye-opening with all of this. Kudos to Nintendo, of course.
For real. Like, I mean, Nintendo just absolutely resilient. I don't understand. You had mentioned that their stock was like pretty cheap. And it's like they're making a 25% return.
Right.
Like that's really good.
That is really good. Yeah.
I don't know why anybody could be complaining if you're a Nintendo investor.
I think, speaking of that, crap. Hang on one second.
All right, I'm gonna riff for a second here.
Hold on, I'm back.
Okay, he's back.
Speaking of that, Nintendo has reported investor information.
Yeah, just this morning they released their investor report, and they had a meeting with investors, and they put out some interesting information.
Yep. So Nintendo president Furukawa says that.
Well, you remember last week, a couple of weeks ago, we had discussed reports.
So we had gone on about the Nintendo successor as
Right.
we perceive it in these drawings and sketches that are to be filed as a patent.
Something like that.
Something like that.
We got two different things here. We have, there were reports a month ago or so that Nintendo had shown off the capabilities of the successor to the Nintendo Switch to developers and third-party partners in private at Gamescom in Germany.
Yes, yeah. And it was, they showcased Breath of the Wild running on, some crazy performance rate and the Matrix game.
Now, Furukawa was asked about these claims, and he says that they are inaccurate.
Inaccurate.
So that's a quote, the word inaccurate.
So when these higher ups at these companies speak, you really have to pay attention to their words.
Right. Notice he didn't call them false.
Right.
He called them inaccurate, which means that the tiniest little detail could have been wrong from reality.
Right.
And he can call them inaccurate.
Right. That doesn't mean false.
Yeah.
He would have said false
if they hadn't.
If they had nothing to do with it.
To the partners. So that to me is confirmation that they did show something.
Something.
To their partners at Gamescom. Furukawa also dismissed the dual screen system that we were discussing last week that Nintendo is in the process of working on a patent for. He said that
it's not necessarily meaningful.
Right. So the patent itself is just it will just be a patent. It doesn't necessarily mean that's what we're doing.
Right. He also, when it came to talking about direct questioning on a Nintendo Switch successor, just declined to comment, which is confirmation in my mind.
Right.
That
normally,
there is one.
This question gets asked every single year at the investor meeting, and he always says, we have no plans to release a new console in the next forecasted year.
If it's a negative answer, he gives a negative answer.
Right.
But when this happens, he declines to comment.
Right.
That tells you
something's
happening. You might as well say yes. Something's happening.
Now, right before we came back from the break, I was reading something. Nintendo released some of this investor information in English, and they said the future outlook for Nintendo Switch. It'll be entering its 8th year in March of 2024. Nintendo will continue to release new titles and content, and this is a quote, without being bound by the traditional concept of the platform life cycle, end quote. Going forward, they would like to continue to see many consumers play Switch and maintain business momentum.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this particular thing screams, hey, don't expect a new console from us next year.
Yeah.
We aren't bound by the traditional concept of the platform
That's an
life
interesting
cycle.
phrase, and I kind of like that phrase.
But I mean, I feel like this is something we've heard from Nintendo before.
Yeah, they don't stick to their word. When the DS came out, they said that was going to be the third pillar.
Right,
And
and
they weren't getting rid of the Game Boy. This is the third pillar.
yeah.
And then all the new Pokemon games come out on DS, and Game Boy gets discontinued.
Yeah, I mean, sure, the Game Boy Advance was around for another year
Yeah,
or two.
with the Game Boy Micro and stuff, but that
you know,
clearly
games still launched for the Game Boy Advance,
Right.
but because the DS was backwards compatible with the Game Boy Advance,
yeah,
it was fine.
It was obvious to me at the time, at least.
yeah.
Um,
And they said the same thing with the 3DS and the Switch, that they would coexist.
Yeah.
And then eventually the 3DS
this is
went
par for the
away.
course for Nintendo to
So
say.
I mean, while it sounds like, hey, the Switch is going to go for a long time. I mean, I could see them selling the Switch into 2025, maybe even 2026.
Yeah, the Switch definitely has a lot of life still in it. There's
Yeah.
there's no.
I mean, and there are games in development right now that are targeting 2024, 2025 for the
Yeah.
Switch.
Right.
So, I mean, those games will still have an opportunity to release, and it's very likely that the next, successor to the Switch will probably be backwards compatible, as that's the industry trend right now.
Mhm.
If you're not backwards compatible, you're anti-consumer, and nobody wants that bad, press.
Right.
So, I mean, even if people are releasing games on the Switch, they'll probably be playable on the successor. So, I mean, they can be right about both things.
Yeah, definitely. So we also got into, or this story also gets into the total number of Switch sales being 132.46 million units. That's hardware, right?
That's hardware. That's Switch consoles sold. That's the whole family: the OLED, the regular Switch, and the Switch Lite.
Mm-hmm.
That puts it far and above beyond the Wii at this point, which I think was a little over 100, maybe 110 million.
Yep. So the Wii is no longer the top-selling console of all time. It is now the Switch.
Right. I think the only other Nintendo piece of hardware to sell more is the DS.
Okay.
But otherwise, it's now the Switch.
Mm-hmm.
The Switch is the top dog.
So
And I don't know that anyone will ever beat the DS. I think it was over 200 million units of the DS that they sold.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And if you think about the DS, the DS Lite, the DSi,
Is it including all
DS,
that?
Yeah, it's including
Okay,
the
right.
whole family of consoles.
All right, that's a little different in my mind. That's
They did the same thing with the 3DS, the 3DS, the 3DS XL, the new 3DS, the new 3DS XL, the 2DS.
Right.
Those are all the 2DS family or the 3DS family. They did the same thing for the DS.
Right.
And then
that's still multiple successors combined.
yeah,
Compared to a single piece of hardware.
sure. I mean, the Switch is the same thing though. You have the Switch Lite,
That's
and the
true.
Switch OLED.
Yeah, okay.
So
that's true.
Nintendo, we're just comparing Nintendo to Nintendo. So
Right.
we're just playing by Nintendo's rules here.
Still an incredible number of Switches.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I have one of each of the Switches.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's 132.46
Right.
million people with
Individual
a Switch.
users.
But I'd probably put that number at about 100 million if I had to guess.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
There's not as many people triple dipping.
Yeah, no
the way
one,
I do.
very few people probably buy every single iteration.
There was also some notable updates to the million seller list that Nintendo puts out. So if a game sells more than 1 million copies, Nintendo will release the exact sales figure for that. So Pikmin 4 came in, which is a new game that just came out a few months ago, at 2.61 million copies.
Mhm.
This is higher than the lifetime sales of every other Pikmin game combined.
Mm-hmm. That's crazy.
So for the first time ever,
they marketed the franchise right.
you're right. I mean, it's been maybe building up over the years. They talked about this like generational. Oh gosh, where is it? I have. Okay, so they said that this is an example of how Pikmin characters have been nurtured by consumers across generations. They attribute the success of Pikmin 4 to that aspect. The people who played Pikmin 1 and 2 back in the day on GameCube, They've now got families. They're sharing that
Yeah.
enthusiasm. There's also Pikmin Bloom from Nintendo and Niantic, which has been increasing the brand IP. They've put out some like digital short animations on YouTube. They have been trying to make this
Pikmin
brand
was
get
included
bigger.
in Smash at
Yeah,
some
I mean,
point.
Pikmin 1 and 2 was released. Olimar's in Smash, along with most of the Pikmin characters that he uses in the battle. So they have been working hard. I mean, Pikmin is like Miyamoto's last like original
Yeah.
IP creation for
Right.
Nintendo. I mean, maybe you include the Mii's with that. I don't know. Maybe.
Sure.
Uh,
I mean,
but as
there
a-
are me
There are Mii games.
titles.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't necessarily make those titles, but he created the concept of the Mii. But when it comes to like just a game experience, like Pikmin was his last baby, and he still is really passionate about Pikmin. And he's even stated in the past, like, I don't understand why it hasn't caught on yet, you know. But it seems like they finally got a hit with Pikmin 4. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which just released at the end of May,
Yep.
or sometime in May, is now at 19.5 million copies, which is bonkers.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Absolutely bonkers.
Breath of the Wild outsold that number still at this point, right?
I don't have Breath of the Wild's. I mean, Breath of the Wild has sold more in 7 years than
this
Tears
has
of the
in
Kingdom has in
a few months.
4 months.
Yeah.
But Tears of the Kingdom will definitely cross 200 million, 20 million by the end of the year.
Yeah.
And it'll be curious to see how long its legs are. Probably not as long as Breath of the Wild's, if I had to guess, because the Switch probably doesn't have another 8 years ahead of it the way that Breath of the Wild did. But I do expect it to sell a very respectable amount. It'll probably get to 25 million by the time the Switch closes its doors.
Probably. That's crazy.
And Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, which has been out now for I think 11 months or so, is at 23.23 million copies, only 3 million behind Sword and Shield's lifetime sales so far. Scarlet and Violet will take over from Sword and Shield. And this 23.23 million also puts Scarlet and Violet just a couple million behind Gold and Silver version.
Wow.
It's likely that Scarlet and Violet, by the time sales are finished for it, will surpass the lifetime
Gold and
sales of
Silver.
everything but Red, Blue, and Yellow version.
Wow. That's some crazy stuff. I wanted to point out at this point that this research, these numbers, or this analysis, I guess you'd call it, comes from Bloomberg.
No, this is all.
This is all
released
stuff
by
Nintendo has reported.
Yeah.
When it comes down to the investor, though,
The investor comments from the meeting were reported on by Bloomberg. With someone in the room.
And Bloomberg Intelligence, their little division, did a lot of speculation, I guess, or analysis. I just had a few excerpts from their article.
Let me get to one more sales
go for
piece.
it.
We're almost done with the sales. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is at a whopping 57.01
That's nuts.
million units. This means that almost half of people who own a Nintendo Switch have purchased this game.
Mario Kart 8.
And Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is a port of a Wii U game.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
We were talking a few weeks ago about how, like, the next Mario Kart game might be like a Super Smash Kart or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
This makes me think that Nintendo is scared to lose the Mario Kart branding.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if Mario Kart some people consider Mario Kart Tour, the mobile game, to be Mario Kart 9.
Yeah.
I have a hard time calling it Mario Kart 9. But let's say it's Mario Kart 9. So the next Mario Kart game is Mario Kart 10. If they want to just kind of succeed the series with Super Smash Kart or something like that, I think they're gonna. I mean, the consumer would probably get it, right?
Yeah,
They'd probably get that. Hey, this is Mario Kart, but just with more Nintendo characters now.
Or they just add more Nintendo characters to Mario Kart
and just keep calling it Mario Kart. I mean, that's an option too. But I mean, imagine a Mario Kart opportunity where like, hey, everyone in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is now in Mario Kart,
Right.
and the power ups are now across Nintendo and third party franchises, not just the usual things you're used to seeing.
Yeah, that would be crazy. I could still see it being called Mario Kart.
Yeah,
But yeah, that would be crazy.
yeah. So I mean, yeah, just 50. I think this is Nintendo's highest selling game of all time. Period.
It doesn't make sense how this is a Wii port. And
No, a Wii U.
A Wii U port, I'm sorry.
So since they last reported the sales earlier this year, it has sold an additional 1.5 million units. Which, we're talking about like a 10-year-old game at this point.
Yeah.
Still, I mean, they talked about the Blue Ocean back in the day. And like evergreen titles that just never stop selling. This is why we haven't gotten a new console Mario Kart game. Because why make a new one? I mean, they've been adding new DLC to the game the last 2 years, which is cool.
Right.
And that's the way to do it, I guess.
8 keeps selling.
8 keeps selling, so why make a new one?
If 8 keeps selling, 9 will end that.
Right.
Or 10 or whatever.
10, yeah.
So that's why they wouldn't do that.
Yeah. All right, so what analysis? What
so I just wanted to list this stuff out. Just for completion's sake here. Nintendo reported operating profit of 94.5 billion yen, revenue of 34.9 billion yen. So the same numbers we were looking at, just in yen.
Well, these would be different numbers from a different time of the year.
Oh, you're right. So in the September quarter.
So yeah, the September quarter, that 34 billion yen translates to almost 226 million USD. 226
million. Yeah, so that's one quarter
just
of the compared to the year that we were looking at just now.
Beating expectations. So,
like, they point out that this beats all analysis.
It beat their internal expectations. Yeah. I think they raised their forecast a little bit higher in response to this earnings.
Right. Yeah. So the company's outlook, like their going forecast, they haven't changed it. They put it at 15 million units for the Switch.
Okay.
So they're going to keep the same expectation.
Right. I think after the fiscal year will end in March, right? So the next fiscal year, I think it's predicted that the Switch is going to start getting into single digit territory. Which is like, investors are going to be looking at that as like...
This, I believe, is going into the fiscal year of 2024. So this is like...
Well, it ends in March of 2024.
Right.
So the new fiscal year...
Oh, through March. I'm sorry. You're right.
The new fiscal year will begin April.
So they're expecting 15 million more units of the Switch by March.
Okay.
Sold.
15 more or 15 million total by the end of the fiscal year? I think it's 15 million for the whole year. I don't think it's 15 million more.
The way they wrote it is kind of confusing.
I believe it's 15 million for the current year.
They put their expectations at 15 million units in the year through March.
Right, so that's including everything up till now through March.
Okay.
They expect to hit 15 million units sold.
Yeah, so basically the takeaway there is that they're not changing their expectation.
Okay. I think their software sales are higher than anticipated.
Right.
But hardware is remaining steady from what Nintendo's seeing.
Okay, so let me see here. So the fiscal year 2024 pre-tax profit. I'm not an analyst.
Yeah, the article is pretty.
It's very in depth and analytical, and it talks about their net profits, their expectations, the percentages, what they expect to fall. It says they expect to fall 1.4 to 3% in net profit sales.
Okay. Explain what that means to fall.
It's looking like we're talking about software now. It says, I'll just quote the article here. Nintendo's upgraded fiscal 2024 sales and profit metrics are most likely driven by better than expected sales from new software based on its key franchises, such as Zelda, Pokemon, and Mario, supported by a weaker yen. This is another factor that lends itself to their profit margin over the American companies.
Right.
Is that the yen has dropped in, I guess, like inflation by 6.6%, and that is translating into
It's crazy. Like $1 is worth like 25% more than like a yen over there right now.
Right. And it's crazy. Of fiscal year 2023's pre-tax profit, right? So they're anticipating a fiscal year 2024 sales and net profit drop of 1.4 to 3%. Versus the 9.5 to 21.4% that they had previously.
Okay.
Is what
this is a little above my pay grade.
Yeah, it's pretty technical stuff, but this is Bloomberg's analysis.
So that wrapped up the majority of what was discussed in the investor information and meeting that took place earlier today. But about an hour before we started recording, Nintendo dropped another bomb on the world. And that's that they are officially creating a live-action Legend of Zelda movie. So they announced this with a quote from Nintendo legend and Zelda creator Shigeru Miyamoto. It says, "This is Miyamoto. I have been working on the live-action film of The Legend of Zelda for many years now with Avi Arad-san, who has produced many mega-hit films. I have asked Avi-san to produce this film with me, and we have now officially started the development of the film with Nintendo itself heavily involved in the production. It will take time until its completion, but I hope you look forward to seeing it." So this film, some other details were released in that PR announcement. It's being produced by Nintendo and Arad Productions, which is Avi Arad's company. He produced many of the early Marvel films and most of Sony's blockbusters from the last 5 or 6 years, including stuff like the Uncharted film. The movie is going to be directed by Wes Ball, who directed the Maze Runner trilogy of movies based on a series of books, and the upcoming Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. The film is being co-financed by Nintendo and Sony Pictures Entertainment. Nintendo will be financing more than 50% of the film, they were sure to note. Worldwide distribution will be by Sony Pictures, Inc.
Yeah, so...
This is a lot. Where do we start unpacking? Okay, so Nintendo's making a live-action Zelda movie. We were just talking maybe 2 episodes ago about what Nintendo should do if they were to make a Zelda movie.
Another drop in the bucket of, like...
we kind of seem to come to the conclusion that it would be smartest for Nintendo to make an animated film.
Yeah.
They've come to a different conclusion than us.
They have. So, this can work.
Sure, it can.
I'm not gonna, like, shoot it down right...
No, I mean, I'm...
But they better do it right. Because there's a lot of tradition behind the Zelda games that they can't just hand wave away because it's a movie. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, dude, if Link talks...
Yeah, if Link has never spoken. And I know you can get into, like, oh, he chooses options in dialogue. That's not speaking. That's still a silent character.
Sure.
Stuff like that. If they make Zelda, I don't know, not a blonde princess or something.
Okay.
That would be another. That wouldn't work.
Okay.
For a lot of people.
All right.
And if changing Mario's voice acting in the Mario movie is any precedent, despite how well that movie did financially,
sure,
that's not looking good. I also don't like how many hands are involved in this.
I mean, making a movie is hard. Like, if if anyone's expectation was that Nintendo was going to do this from scratch on their own,
Yeah, of course.
that
I
would
get
be
that.
too
I'm
challenging.
not asking for that.
Um,
But
so with what little information we have, all we can do is look at the history of Avi Arad and this Wes Ball guy. This
mhm.
is kind of all we have to go on so far. Now, Avi Arad, Miyamoto says it himself. He's produced many mega hit
I
films.
love his terminology too.
Like
Mega
that's
hits. They're not hits, they're mega hits.
yeah. So that to me, I don't know. That doesn't scream confidence to me. That screams like I want this movie to be big.
Right.
Not that I want it to be good.
That's the I didn't know how to word it, but that's the impression I'm getting
Yeah.
too.
And then this Wes Ball guy, the Maze Runner films are like, something of like a Hunger Games
Yeah.
kind of, like they're, a bunch of teenagers running around and death is everywhere.
So
And
a bunch of people at the top of this project are not likely Zelda players.
I mean, Zelda's touched a lot of people. I mean, Avi Arad, the dude is like Miyamoto's age, probably hasn't played much Zelda games.
Mm-hmm.
This Wes Ball guy, he's fairly young. I think he's like late 30s, early 40s, something like that.
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised if he's, a player. Maybe he's not played everything, but, he'll probably be like, oh man, I played Ocarina of Time when I was a kid, that kind of a thing.
Which is better than no basis.
Right. It'll be interesting to see, do they base this on a particular game?
Yeah.
Do they do an original story? I think that might be smarter. If we look at each Zelda game, generally speaking, is not a sequel and is its own standalone story somewhere in the Zelda continuity.
Right.
I think it would maybe be smart to make an original Zelda game that could just
Zelda movie.
a Zelda movie that could stand as a part of the larger continuity
Right.
without really
That is its own
screwing
story.
anything up
Right,
that's like
yeah.
preconceived from the games that we know and love already.
Right.
But I could also see the
That
temptation.
would also open the door to a lot of, stuff that I would not want to see.
Right. But I mean, would you rather see them bastardize something original or bastardize Ocarina of Time?
Yeah, I guess I'd rather have this be a flop on its own. If it's gonna be.
I mean, something tells me it won't be a flop.
Okay, not flop's the wrong word.
Yeah.
Disappointment.
A disappointment,
Like
sure.
blasphemy.
This Wes Ball guy, he has been given the keys to a new Planet of the Apes film,
Mm-hmm.
which
Another mega hit as
I mean, it's a
Yeah.
long-standing franchise. I haven't seen any of the newer Apes films. Have you?
Mm-mm.
The ones that had like James
No,
Franco
I
in
never
them?
really cared too much about
No,
them.
you, I liked.
I saw one.
I remember the one when we would have been like tweens or teens
Yeah,
that came
It's
out.
probably the one I saw.
But I've heard the newer ones are pretty good. So they haven't made one in like 5 or 6 years, something like that. And so this is a continuation of those films.
Mm.
They're giving him a chance with a big franchise, and directors, especially when they announce a director this early in the pre-production process,
Mm-hmm.
this we could have 3 different directors' names before we finally get to like the movie begins filming.
Right.
So
Yeah, that
I wouldn't be too set. I mean, the fact that they did announce him this early, they must really like him to like attach his name to it.
these people seem to be very much Hollywood blockbuster type.
Yeah,
You know.
Miyamoto wants this to be a big spectacle.
Yeah,
You
and
know.
I don't know that that's the right approach.
I mean, okay, so let's say they approach this with like a Lord of the Rings-esque budget, with like these crazy sets
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. I mean, I don't mind them throwing that kind of money Zelda's way.
Right. It's,
Like,
I mean, just don't make Link talk. That's probably the biggest.
that's like your only... Okay, so hypothetically, he doesn't say a word through the whole movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then like it gets to the end.
And he says something.
He says like one line, like 4 words.
At that point would be a conscious creative decision.
Right.
Like clearly they did that on purpose.
Right.
So even if I don't agree with it, I can respect that it was a decision that the holders of Zelda made.
Sure.
I'd respect that more than if
So you'd be willing to like, okay, I can let that slide.
Yeah, but if it was just a straight oversight and no one, no one stopped it, yeah, that's gonna be bad for me.
Well, how would you know?
What do you mean? How would I know?
How would you know whether, like, you mean like if he's talking through the whole movie?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It would be obvious. I mean,
right. Yeah, like the trailer.
I'll probably talk in the trailer.
Hi, I'm Link. I'm a regular 12-year-old boy.
I don't think he would say that because that would be dumb. But
I grew up in the fairy town of blah blah blah.
Yeah, not Kokori Forest or anything like canonical. Just some new crap.
This is my friend Saria.
Yeah, they just botch it.
Oh,
that would be so dumb. Dude.
See, I don't know. There's a small part of me that would love to watch that movie too, just as like a holy crap, how could they get this so wrong?
I'm gonna say something. I don't hate the cartoon, and in the cartoon he does speak. So I'm not.
He talks a lot.
He talks a lot. So I'm not closed-minded.
Well, excuse me, Richard.
So he, I don't know. Maybe I side with the cartoon because so many people crap on it and hate it.
Yeah.
That I want to give it love.
Okay.
I own it, like the box set. So.
I mean, it was one of those things that Nintendo of America was just like, sure, make a cartoon. Yeah. Like.
It's a good cartoon. Like, they do a lot of, Zelda.
Yeah.
Like, Ganon's there. And,
yeah.
Like, they pay homage to a lot of the items in the games. It's good. It's better than like people make it sound.
Right. So one other thing I want to point out about this story is that Nintendo is partnering with Sony on this endeavor.
Yeah, so that's kind
to
of
finance and distribute the movie.
It's kind of an elephant in the room, but that's Sony Pictures is not PlayStation.
No, you're right. I mean, Sony Pictures has made like a Gran Turismo movie. They've made an Uncharted movie.
Right, which are subsidiary properties.
Right. So it's interesting. It makes sense that they go with a Japanese company, and Sony's probably the biggest Japanese movie producing company.
I feel better about them going with Sony Pictures, than them going with like Warner Brothers or Paramount or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, at least it's in Japanese hands. Well, I mean, they're developing this game with Western people, like a Western director, a Western producer.
No. Yeah. Okay.
So I don't know. I just think it's interesting. One of their chief rivals, someone who they notoriously are known for not playing too much ball with, and that goes both ways. They're partnering. I mean, it's not like they're partnering with PlayStation Pictures. They're partnering with Sony Pictures, but it's still interesting. Someone they've had a relationship with, in the past. They worked on a console with Sony at one point, the Nintendo PlayStation.
Yeah.
And that went sour, and Sony spun it off into its own thing.
There's an irony there that Sony is working on a product of one of Nintendo's biggest, most successful properties.
Yeah, so it's I don't know. I just think it's interesting that
they've tried to mimic in the past,
right? And that they've just worked it out, and I guess they're friends. That's cool.
This does not mean that they're friends, but they have a business relationship.
They have a business relationship
on this project.
All right. Well, I just want to leave us with one last question, and maybe this is something we can talk about next week. I know we're like we talked earlier. We're not really like super into celebrities and stuff like that, and actors.
You are. I'm not.
I mean, there are certain actors I like and I enjoy. Like if they're in a new movie, I might want to go see them. Like I enjoy their performances. So I mean, who plays Link? Who plays Zelda? Who plays Ganondorf? Let's do a little bit of homework.
Mm-hmm.
Let's come back next week with some choices. They don't have to be serious choices. You can get silly and stupid if you want. But I think it would be fun to kind of follow up on this and talk some names and, see if we can imagine together what that might look like.
Sure. Yep, sounds good.
All right, so Danny DeVito is Ganon. That's my pick.
See, I like not to unpack now, but I would almost want an all British cast. I feel like
that would
work best for this.
Okay. I think that's likely. I mean, that's like the Star Wars approach almost. Like they tend to get like
Yeah, you know, English accents. I can't
yeah.
imagine an American like
You know,
Southern California accent.
right. And I think this it works really well, especially when you have different groups of people, like different like races, like you've got elves, you've got fairies, you've got,
Mm,
desert tall women lady, like I think it helps. There's so many different English accents when you look at like the British Isles. Like,
mm,
you got Scotland, you got
right.
Ireland, you got Wales, you got the UK. Um, I think they can represent, like, oh, this race of people, the Gorons are gonna, talk like they're from Wales, or
Right.
like, I've noticed that like a game like Dragon Quest, they rely on those kinds of English accents to kind of emphasize like different groups of
Well,
people.
emphasize not just that, but emphasize the atmosphere
Yeah,
of the game. Which works out. It
yeah,
works out well. The first game I played that was like that, I've talked about it before. The Last Story, from Mistwalker, stuck with their British voice acting team, and it sounds great. It just worked
yeah.
so well for that game.
I mean, I think there's room for people that don't have an accent, but I don't think they should be like, "Sup, Link?"
No, I don't think that the script is going to include Southern Californian dialect,
Right.
but or slang, but just the voice.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about the
Okay.
voice, the accent.
Yeah. I mean, well, hopefully Link doesn't talk at all.
Yeah, God willing, Link does not
But if he
speak in this
does
game.
have an accent,
I mean, he can make all the sounds in the world as he
right?
does in the games.
Yeah.
Just don't have him speak
Yeah.
dialogue, please.
All right. Well, we're just gonna leave you with that. We'll
Yep.
be back next week with some fan casting for y'all.
We'll be talking about that again.
Sorry, this is our longest episode yet.
Oh, definitely.
So let's put a pin in it.
And transmission.